Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Education. We'll start with a roll call. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Carlquist?
Present.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Ms. Conroy? Here. Mrs. Davy?
Present.
Mrs. Droney?
Here.
Ms. Hirsch?
Here.
Mrs. Ostojic?
Present. 7 board members here, none are absent. We did not have any closed session this evening, so this is the beginning of our meeting. Thank you all for joining us, and please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We start our evening with student recognition, and I will turn the microphone over to Dr. Krizik.
Tonight, we are here to celebrate the accomplishments of the York Community High School students who were the all-state selectees in the Illinois Music Educators Association recent competition. To give us some more information and an overview and to help introduce our gifted musicians, we have our music department chair and music director, Mr. Bill Riddle. Mr. Riddle?
The red light. Good evening. Pleasure to be here this evening and have an opportunity to celebrate these great accomplishments of our student musicians from York High School. We have 10 musicians that we are recognizing tonight. To give you just a little bit of, I probably saw in your program a little bit about what IMEA is, but the Illinois Music Educators Association is the state chapter of a national organization, MENC, which yearly has a process that recognizes the achievements of student musicians in our state. It's one of the largest organizations in the country, and the process goes a little something like this. In early fall, in October, our students have the opportunity, all of our instrumentalists and vocal students, and as well as students who are interested in music composition, have the opportunity to audition for the honor to be selected into first what's called all-district and then all-state band. It goes a little different for our composition students, but for our vocalists and for our instrumentalists, they audition in October. Very competitive field of usually over 3,000 students from 75 to 80 different schools. They prepare audition material, and they are adjudicated at in an event in an area high school, and they are selected by that audition to participate in what's called the district. We are in part of District 1 Music Festival. We had 30 students this year that were selected for that honor in all three of those three areas of vocal, orchestral, and band musicians. And then there are 9 districts in the state. District 1 is one of the largest districts, and then they are selected by their ranking in that district level participation to be invited to the All-State Festival, which just took place a couple of weeks ago in Peoria. The composition students have a slightly different requirement in that they can enter numerous pieces that they have either composed or arranged for several different mediums, and then they are adjudicated and judged on those arrangements and then selected to go right on to the All-State level. And we had 2 musicians that were selected for that. So again, we're fresh off of the festival, which was just a couple weeks ago. Marvelous performances and a chance for these student musicians to participate with some of the finest high school musicians in our state. Before I bring these students up to be recognized, I would like to recognize our music faculty from York that's present tonight. Rebecca Marionetti, is our choral director, Mr. Ray Ostwald, our orchestra director, Chris Gemko, our guitar instructor, Mr. Whitaker Blackall, who teaches also guitar, piano, and music composition, and Mr. Mike Pavlik, who is actually rehearsing right as we're speaking right now over at the high school, couldn't be here tonight. I'd like to recognize that faculty first. And I would like to now bring up our students. Let's start with Kyle Metters, who is one of our composition award winners. Kyle, if you want to just come up and we'll start a lineup here. Our second composition award winner is Tim McDunn. Kathleen McGovern is a vocalist, a soprano. Phoenix Melvin, another vocalist and another soprano. Madeline Mueller, violinist. Keith Percella, a double bass player. Kelsey Roberts, another vocalist and alto. Michael St. Peter, who is another vocalist, a tenor. And Andrew Way, a bass clarinetist. We also had one additional musician who couldn't be here tonight, Abby Arnold, who actually at the district level was selected for both her choral audition and for her instrumental audition, which she plays the bassoon. And so she went on to All-State on the bassoon. Why don't we give all these excellent musicians our appreciation.
Oh, hang on. Thank you, Mr. Riddle. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to extend our congratulations to all of you. It's wonderful for our district to have students that are the best in the state. And, this kind of accomplishment comes not only from the talent that you have, but also from your passion and your commitment to excel. And for that, we'd like to congratulate all of you. And Mr. Riddle introduced some of the teaching staff, but I would also say that this kind of accomplishment also comes from the support of your family, from your teachers, from your mentors, from the music program that you have. So I would give congratulations to the support system that helped create your success. So we'll just take a... With that, I'd like to read a proclamation. Whereas the Illinois Music Educators Association, the IMEA, the competitions have become the most prestigious statewide student recognition program in music education, and whereas high school musicians undergo stringent auditions competing against students from one of 9 individual IMEA districts, followed by the qualifying students earning a place in that district's honor ensemble from which the all-state musicians are chosen, thus representing some of the best musicians in the state. And whereas this program encourages excellence on the part of individual students and encourages further music study and artistry, and whereas York Community High School students Abigail Arnold, bassoon, Kyle Meters, composition, Timothy McDunn, composition, Kathleen McGovern, soprano, Phoenix Melvin, soprano, Madeline Mueller, violin, Keith Perscala, double bass, Kelsey Roberts, alto, Michael St. Peter, tenor, and Andrew Way, bass clarinet, were awarded all-state recognition in their particular music specialty at the 2010 IMEA All-State Festival held this fall in Peoria. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community School District 205 express congratulations to these students and to their teachers for this outstanding accomplishment. Congratulations. Thank you. And as always, when we have a recognition, we invite the families and students to stay for the rest of the regular agenda. However, if you choose to take your leave and go home and work on homework or other things, we will happily allow that too. So we're going to take a couple-minute breaks and allow those families that want to go on with their evenings to exit, and then we'll rejoin the meeting. Thank you. Our next item on our agenda is public comment. Before we start the public comment, some of the topics we're talking about this evening are new to the board, new to our district, and Dr. Krizik's just going to give a quick introduction, and then we'll go ahead and move forth with the public comment.
And the intent of this introduction is certainly not to deter anyone from speaking in public comment tonight, but just to try to put a framework about what this process is all going to be about. Tonight, this is the first of at least 4 meetings where the Board of Education will be deliberating over budget reductions and/or new expenditures to go forward in the 2011-2012 school year. Tonight, the board will hear for the very first time the summary of recommendations that came forth from 28 different committees. It is not an evening where the board will take action on any of these recommendations. Only a goal, hopefully at the end of this evening, is to identify a budgetary reduction level. And once that reduction level is established, to then come back to future meetings to discuss what will be comprised of those reductions. I know that when we each read recommendations that are contained within written reports, when they're in black and white, they become very real to us and can certainly generate, for some of us, a very strong reaction because they may be very near and dear to what we support, what we believe in, or what we're involved in. So I want to reassure everyone in the audience tonight is that the EPERT reports that we're reviewing are recommendations. They're advisory recommendations that may or may not come to fruition, one, based on the budgetary reduction level, or based on any additional budgetary reduction suggestions and ideas that come forth through the board's deliberations over the next few meetings. So I know we have students here this evening, and I'm really glad to see students here participating in what's a governmental process. But I don't want any student here thinking this evening that just because what's in a report is what will be a final recommendation. There's lots of conversation to be held, and again, it will be driven in part by what the overall reduction level will be set at. So I wanted to frame that just a little bit because I do think that as we experienced last year, when anyone sees what potential reductions could be, it really does bring out passion in each of us about what's important to us. But I would like everyone to maybe just watch the process as it evolves to see exactly where we might end up at the end of the day. And hopefully by March 8th, which is the goal, we will know exactly the direction that we are going in next school year. We will also know over the course of the next few weeks what other options for revenue enhancements and or other expenditure reductions, could emerge based on the deliberation of these EPERT reports. Again, individuals worked very hard to identify some budget reductions. Some will come forth and some will not, but it will be the process that will help decide that. So I just want everyone here this evening to know is that those recommendations that have been made are not carved in stone, and there is lots of opportunity for discussion at the board table in terms of what we're going to do to go forward. So I just really felt that it was important for everyone to hear that and to know that this is a process. This is what this is. This is a process. We'll have more discussion on what that looks like tonight when we do the EPERT presentation, which we hope will help everyone understand really what the EPERT process is all about, what the recommendations by each of the committees were, what the administrative feedback to some of those recommendations were. And then again, for the board then to hopefully begin in a conversation about what potential reduction levels could be going forward. So I just kind of want to open public comment with that, just to kind of put a framework about where we're headed this evening. So without further ado.
Thank you, Dr. Krizik. We have quite a number of individuals who have signed up to speak tonight, so thank you. We appreciate your taking the time to come and share your thoughts with us. In order to make sure that we have enough time to hear all the speakers that want to present to the board, we have a strict 3-minute policy for speaking, and there is a light up there that will help you keep track of it. So when I call your name, I'm going to call the first 2 individuals, and as each individual speaks, I'd ask for the next speaker to come up so that they're ready to move into the position, just to make sure that we have enough time to cover all the speakers and everything on the agenda. When the light hits yellow, you need to start wrapping up. When the light hits red, I'm not meaning to be rude, but we're absolutely going to cut you off because we have to be fair to all of the individuals here that want to address the board, as well as making sure that we have enough time to conduct the business of the board. So with that, we will start. We start with Mr. Paul Garino and followed by Mr. John DeCiani. I'm sorry, one more thing. When you start, if you could state your name and your address for the record, please.
Paul Garino, 836 North Emory. I'm here about the body mass index. I've been following it. I've talked to some parents from Hawthorne. I talked to Dr. Rossetti, our county superintendent, and I'm in contact with the people from the Department of Health, and then they put me in contact with the CDC. And what I have here is an 8-page report from the Center for the CDC, Center for Disease Control. And when I used to teach, I would tell my students that the most important thing is the bibliography. And the bibliography here is from the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Journal of the American Medical Association, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This has nothing to do with educational theory. This is sound medical fact. Okay. Research has not established the effectiveness and cost-effectiveness of BMI screening programs, and communities typically do not have the resources in place to help at-risk students assess treatment services. More evaluation is needed to determine whether BMI screening programs are a promising approach for addressing obesity among children and adolescents. Then the American Academy of Pediatrics, since I've only got 3 minutes, has 9 or 10 suggestions from the Academy with, I believe, only one footnote on that one. A number of concerns have been expressed about school-based BMI screening programs, including that they might stigmatize students and lead to harmful behaviors. Other concerns are that these programs might be ineffective, and it goes on and on and on and on. And there are 9 recommendations from the Academy of Pediatrics. So I'm going to hand this over to Mrs. Davy, and then she can give it to whoever wants. And this is the first time I've ever been under 3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Garino. Our next speaker is John DeCiani, followed by Elise Flynn.
Yeah, my name is John DeCiani. My address is 765 Hawthorne. I'm part of York Gymnastics, and when I heard gymnastics may be cut, I was devastated. This is the best sport I've been a part of, and I have tried almost every other sport, and none of them clicked for me like gymnastics. The guys on the team are like my brothers to me, and the team is like an ever-expanding family. I'm excited for the future of York Gymnastics and plan on advancing my skills and reaching my higher goals and expectations. Please find other ways to balance the budget and try not to cut any other sports. Thank you. And I also have packets on the statistics and stuff.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Elise Flynn, followed by Matt Flynn.
Hello, my name is Elise Flynn, 15W 253 Lexington Street, and I'm the proud parent of a York boys gymnast. My comments tonight are specifically directed for all 7 of the athletic programs up for elimination, affecting roughly 115 participants. I understand that no one in this room enjoys taking a benefit away from a student and recognize that this is a difficult process for the board and each committee. With that in mind, I have a few inquiries, suggestions about the expert process and thoughts to consider during the decision-making. I am concerned that the Interscholastic Sports Committee was comprised completely of staff members and coaches without outside input. Additionally, it does not appear that the 7 affected programs had committee representation. I had significant trouble trying to reconcile the accuracy of the presented figures, specifically number of participants and program expenses, without any support documents. I could not tell if the expenses listed were actual, projected, or budgeted. Are these figures accurate? Prior to making program decisions, I believe complete accuracy of the data should be attested to if it is to be relied upon. To truly determine the effect on participants, I think it's important to determine how many of these students would go from a 1 sport to 0 sports if the cuts were activated. I did not see any data breakout for the number of multiple sport participants versus single sport participants. I suspect many of these 115 participants will be left with a 0 sport participation, which has a much greater qualitative negative impact. Clearly, the 7 programs up for elimination have the lowest rosters of the 28 listed sports. However, you can't have 100 kids on a bowling team, a golf team, a gymnastics team, or a diving team. These sports inherently are smaller base teams, and I think it's counterintuitive to look mainly at participation levels. I didn't see in the report that consideration was given to requiring each sport to reduce their expenses by 10%, which would have the same economic benefit on a fair share approach without eliminating 7 sports. As you'll hear tonight, the York boys gymnastics team is legendary. 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, we've had state champions, all from rosters of 17 to 23 kids. While the boys gymnastics in all 7 of these sports are small in numbers, their positive benefits, educational, physical, emotional, relationship, and teamwork are no less mighty than if they were on a team of 100. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Matt Flynn, followed by Jack Eliason.
Hello, my name is Matt Flynn. I live at 15W 253 Lexington Street. When I was in the 4th grade, I was enrolled in a gymnastics program. I fell in love with the sport. I continued into the 5th grade. I took a break in middle school, grades 6 through 8, to try out other sports, clubs, and activities. The summer after 8th grade, I went back to gymnastics. I participated in a co-ed York High School summer camp. I looked past the heat, lack of air conditioning, and physical demands, and came to the realization that gymnastics was my calling, and that's what I wanted to do in the future. As soon as school started, I began my countdown to February 16th, the first day of the York High School boys gymnastics season. In my previous years, I had heard about and read in the newspaper about amazing gymnasts including Christian Carmona, Kyle Carmona, Tim Drahokapel, and Caleb Strait. Furthermore, gymnastics is the one single sport I do at York High School. Our numbers may be small, but that means nothing. 23 gymnasts. 23 is the number of students in my geometry honors math class. Does that mean my math class lacks importance? Please, don't make numbers based on judgments. When gymnastics season started, I enjoyed every single day of it. Gymnastics taught me how to motivate myself, and possibly even more important, how to motivate others. This life skill will help me not only in the gym, but in the real world, the work world. At the end of last year, I came to an even more important realization. It was finally my turn to step up to the plate and carve my story into the class of 2013 York Community High School athletic program. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jack Eliason, followed by Santiago Ortega.
My name's Jack Eliason. I live at 365 Laurel in Elmhurst. Believe it or not, I was a gymnast too. I'm not like these guys because I've gained a little weight since then. I graduated from York in 1962. I was as small as they, in fact, I was smaller than some of them. I had to look for a sport that a small boy could get into. I got into gymnastics not knowing what it was all about. Really the thing with me is how long this has lasted for me. It's all relationships. I went through York. I was a gymnast. I lettered my junior and senior year. I went on to the University of Illinois, and back then you could only compete for 3 years. You couldn't compete your freshman year, and I had no intention of continuing any kind of gymnastics. But the camaraderie I built up with the juniors and seniors at York, I still had a lot of friends there from the gymnastics team at York. They encouraged me. You know, a lot of times kids will say, as soon as he's gone, and we don't care. But they encouraged me, the juniors that were now seniors, they encouraged me, go out for the team, Jack. I said, well, I really don't want to. Come on, go out for the team. I did. I was very successful, and I made great friends with the Illinois gymnasts. And believe it or not, we are friends to this day. They had, 2 years ago, they had a 100-year anniversary at Illinois that was celebrating gymnastics at the university. 100 years, so now it's about 102 years. They had a reunion. There were 9 guys from the team that I was on that showed up. It was unbelievable. Guys that I hadn't seen in, 40 years or 45 years, and we're just as close as we were when we were with the York gymnasts. I still keep in contact with a bunch of the York guys. I keep in contact with my former teammates from Illinois. It's something that these young men are going to carry on for the rest of their life. That's what gymnastics is all about. It's relationships, and it's a fantastic sport for building that up. I was also on the tennis team at York, and believe me, the group of gymnasts has stayed together for a long, long time. And again, it's been mentioned, 23 guys last year, but what a group. I was given the honor of working as an assistant under Coach Johannes, and I came back to York, my alma mater, and I'm not kidding, these guys worked their hearts out. Great group, and I was honored to even be with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Santiago Ortega, followed by Marty Larson.
Good evening. My name is Santiago Ortega, and I live at 3N 375 Wilson Street. Gymnastics has done a lot for me in the past 4 years that I've been in it. Gymnastics, to tell you the truth, doesn't really feel like a team. I believe that it's more of like a family. I feel that it's like a family because we do everything together. We eat breakfast, we have dinner, we support each other, we help each other push, to get our dreams. We do the best we can, and we're proud of what we do. We have been changed for the better because of gymnastics, because of the great opportunity that it has offered to us, and I would hate for this to change. We really don't want to see our family get split up, so please think about other ways that you guys could, get rid of the deficit. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Marty Larson, followed by Mark Obel.
My name is Marty Larson. I live at 650 Sailor Avenue. I'm here tonight because York Athletics really shaped the trajectory of my life. And it's really disheartening to hear about gymnastics being considered to be eliminated from the program. I was part of a team that grew from a very poor level of productivity and success to one that was very high in its success level. We took third in the state in the year 1980, and in following years we went further, took second that year, and first the year after that. And what these guys are saying is absolutely the truth. I'm going to be going on a 25-year wedding anniversary this year with 3 other gymnasts that I competed with. These types of relationships do last a long, long time. And I've been asked to read a letter from Rich Larson, who was the coach at York for a very long time. I'm sure you all know him. And Rich was one of the individuals that had probably the biggest impact in my life as a teenager, and certainly a very positive one. And he says, I know I speak for many former athletes, parents, and coaches who have been part of a very long and prosperous gymnastics program at York High School. It pains me greatly to hear that our athletic program at York has had to take such drastic measures to stay within budget. I am sure that not all the viable ways were considered, and I know that many of my former colleagues would agree. Rather than take opportunities for student athletes, couldn't the burden be shared with all of York's sports programs? Given the situation at hand, I know no coach would want to lose their program. Having gone to different schools when gymnastics programs were being considered eliminated, all would agree, share the burden rather than lose one, was fair and equitable to all involved. Parents and students were adamant and willing to pay a higher fee if the program could continue to exist. I implore you to consider other ways. I know that I do not have all the answers that you seek, but I know that given the chance, there is a better way for future athletes not to fear the loss of the program and, in fact, be a bond for them that creates success in their lives. Rich goes on to say that York Gymnastics has been one of the most successful programs for York High School. We've had numerous state medalists. We've had numerous teams that have medaled on behalf of York, and I think it would be wrong to consider cutting any of the programs, let alone to single out certain programs for elimination. I think we can all share the pain. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mark Obel, followed by Harry Schneider.
Good evening. I'm Mark Obel at 302 Berteau. My family has lived here in Elmhurst for about 10 and a half years now. And I have two sons, a 10th grader, sophomore, and a 6th grader. And it's no coincidence that I have a 10th grader. We've been living here 10 and a half years. Before we moved to Elmhurst, we did, I think, a lot of research, looked at a lot of resources, things such as a state school report card. And we felt that Elmhurst was probably the best place to raise children and raise a family. My concern now is obviously, like everyone else here, is cutting some of the programs and activities at the school, along with all the curriculum cuts that have already been made. And I'm sure that there's hundreds of other present and future Elmhurst residents that use the same resources and state school report card that we used. I realize it's tough economic times, but I think by eliminating more and more activities, schools are becoming less and less attractive, which in turn is going to lead to people looking at other schools, other communities. Obviously, it's going to hurt our programs, our enrollment, our tax basis, tax revenue in the community as a whole. I know it's very early stages, but my family and I have already discussed possibility of transferring schools if some of these cuts do take place, and that's not something that we want to do. I'm going to switch up a little bit and go off to gymnastics. My concerns with the golf program. My sophomore has participated in many other activities in and outside of school, sports and otherwise. Golf is probably the one thing that has taught him the most in discipline and self-confidence. He will stop everything and drop everything to go golfing, which means stopping Xbox, stopping video games, which is unbelievable. And, you know, by eliminating or cutting back on some of these activities, I think that's a danger. Is that all it's going to do is leave more time for his video games and Xbox games and more idle time for the kids after school. And with golf in particular, consider how many other high school sports activities can you do when you're 30, 40, 50 years old. Plus, golf is more and more involved in the business community. For those of you that do participate, and I can tell you firsthand, business has been done on a golf course. A lot of charitable events are done on golf courses. Goodwill events take place. So golf is more than just a sport. It's an advantage for people in the business community also. And, you know, these decisions obviously not only affect the present students, but the future students too. As I mentioned, I have a sixth grader who wants to follow in his brother's footsteps and wants to participate in a lot of the same sports and activities that he's participating in. But it's difficult as a parent to encourage him to do this if we don't know these activities are going to be in place in a couple of years. So I strongly encourage you, please look at all options and anything that's feasible to keep the activities in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Harry Schneider, followed by Jeff Kochek.
Good evening. My name is Harry Schneider, 413 Hawthorne Street. Our daughters are York graduates, and one of them is a lifelong resident of Elmhurst. She was an elite gymnast and an All-American in Missouri State as a recipient of an athletic scholarship, which should interest a lot of these boys that are sitting in the back room. Her two sons are gymnasts and are York graduates. In 2008, they led York to its first state championship in 25 years. They are both individual event state champions, have athletic scholarship offers, and are involved in local gymnastic programs in both competition and the coaching arenas. Needless to say, we are a gymnastic family, and we're shocked and extremely disappointed that you might be considering the dropping of the boys' program. In 2008, when York won the state championship, there was renewed interest in the program, and the community was very supportive. Gymnastics is a very special sport. It takes a special young man to compete in this sport. You must be fearless, talented, and be a tremendous athlete to be competitive. The sport requires hard work, dedication, and a commitment beyond imagination to master difficult gymnastic moves. Aren't these the elements of life that we as parents and teachers are trying to instill in our children? I think they are. It's a team sport that separates itself from any other team sport. It's the epitome of fair play and sportsmanship. All gymnasts want to win their event, but they respect the competition for the skills they display like in no other sport. When attending a meet, the mutual respect these athletes display towards one another is impressive and obvious. So what does gymnastics offer the student? As previously mentioned, it's a path to all the qualities he needs to succeed in life: hard work, dedication, commitment, fair play, and good sportsmanship. Should not a gymnast have the same opportunity to compete for his high school as those who play basketball and football and have the same chance for an athletic scholarship? I think so. Most gymnasts are not 6 feet 3 inches tall, nor do they weigh 200 pounds, but they are superb athletes. And they should have the same opportunity during their high school career to participate in the sport in which they excel. If we don't afford them this opportunity, it's prejudicial and extremely unfair. I understand these are difficult times. There are administrative costs and coaches are needed, but we have a gym and we have the equipment. The sport does not require expensive uniforms or protective gear. So let's get creative and keep the program in place. This problem has arisen at other high schools in the area. To minimize costs, schools have combined their gymnastic programs and shared the operating costs, but they have kept the sport available to the students. If you have not considered the possibility, in fairness to the students, I would ask you to look into a co-op alternative to keep the program in place. Please do whatever you can is necessary to keep gymnastics alive at York. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Is Mr. Kochek here? Jeff Kochek? Kosiak? Okay, Kosiak. After Mr. Kosiak, I have Nick, and I think it's Creel.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Kosiak from 486 South Kenilworth. I would just like to make a few comments about the golf program. I would like to voice both my concern and support for the boys and girls golf programs. Over the past 3 years, I have had the pleasure of experiencing the boys golf program, and I have nothing but the highest praise for the program and the people involved. I believe that one of the great things about York is the breadth of programs, both athletic and non-athletic, that are available to our children. My son is just one example of someone who was able to find his niche in a sport that he loves over these past 3 years. And I believe that there will always be kids that will be looking for that same niche, giving them a chance to excel at something that they have been working towards even before high school. In my opinion, to remove golf would be like losing part of the symbol of what York stands for. And I also believe golf is part of the fabric of our community as well, just as it is in the surrounding schools and towns such as Hinsdale, LT, Glenbard West, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, I also have a 7th grader at Sandburg who, along with no less than 5 or 6 other kids his age that we know, are out there right now taking lessons and practicing in hopes of one day playing for the Dukes. My 7th grader just had a lesson the other day at the Golf Dome with Dan Kochevar, who is a golf pro and father of one of the top golfers in the state of Illinois from Glenbard West. Dan is also teaching a handful of these other Sandburg kids, and he told me he couldn't help but think of how good the Dukes are going to be in the next couple of years. Not to say that they're not going to be good next year. I know these are difficult times that call for difficult decisions, and I understand how hard your job is, especially with what looks like to be an unprecedented financial burden on our schools. But in the end, I can only hope that you can find an economic way of saving the boys and girls golf programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nick Creel, followed by Sue Carmona. Okay, thank you. Then we'll follow with Kyle Carmona.
My name is Nick Creel. I live on 190 East North Avenue. Being a part of York's high school gymnastics program has been definitely going to be the most memorable time of my high school career. My experience in gymnastics was a really good one. I honestly don't know what my life would be like if gymnastics wasn't involved. Coming in as a freshman but no gymnastics experience, I ended up competing with my team in state 3 years in a row and making it as an individual 3 years in a row. I was part of that team that won state in 2008, and there's no way I could ever forget that. The best thing I got out of the gymnastics program is learning how to believe in myself. I feel that the gymnastics program at York High School was definitely a life-changing experience. The York Gymnastics program has been around for decades, and I don't believe that should change. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last 2 speakers are Kyle Carmona, followed by Christian Carmona.
My name is Kyle Carmona, 413 South Hawthorne Avenue. I'd like to start out by talking a little bit about myself. My name is Kyle Joseph Carmona. I'm 2 years out of high school. I coach gymnastics every day, and I'm a registered judge this year. I am also a soldier in the United States Army National Guard, and I exceed above 100% in every category of the U.S. Army physical fitness testing. Specifically, I am a soldier in a lightweight, advanced infantry, reconnaissance, and intelligence gathering unit. I have multiple letters of recommendation for Special Forces, and I compete mixed martial arts representing Alpha Troop's 2nd 106 Cavalry, 33rd Infantry Brigade combat team. My unit hits deployment in 2012 to Afghanistan, and I can confidently say that I'm ready for that. To put it shortly, I shine when I need to, I blend in when I need to, and most importantly, I am the fastest, strongest, and I am the best. I tackle all my tasks with the utmost sincerity and perseverance and will be nothing less than excellent. I've accomplished these feats at 19 years of age because of the tremendous physical strength it takes to be a gymnast and learning how to keep my composure while gaining multiple state titles in a dead silent gym with hundreds of eyes watching me. I couldn't do it alone, of course. I have the support of my coaches, parents, and especially my teammates. And those teammates happen to be my best friends to this day and will be for the rest of my life. York Boys Gymnastics has taught me to excel under pressure and never give up. And I hope York Boys Gymnastics can keep providing these opportunities in the future. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Christian Carmona.
Christian Carmona, 413 Hawthorne. I'm Christian Carmona, for those of you who don't know. I'm a former student-athlete gymnast at York. Before I entered high school in the fall of 2004, boys gymnastics had suffered over 20 years without a state championship. In 2006, my sophomore year, I received second place in the still rings at state. Former teammate Luke Kohovic received second place finish on the floor exercise. In 2007, our team brought home a second-place trophy after being both conference and sectional champions. My brother, Kyle Carmona, placed 11th in the pommel horse as a sophomore. I myself won the individual all-around competition along with the still rings and the vault titles. I also received the silver medal on the parallel bars as a junior. I was named Junior Athlete of the Year. In 2008, my senior year, I led my team to a conference, sectional, and state championship. Teammate Nick Creel placed 9th on vault as a sophomore. Caleb Strach placed 5th on parallel bars, also as a sophomore. Kyle placed 2nd on the pommel horse as a junior. At the end of the year, I had been Athlete of the Week multiple times, broke every single record at York, won a total of $1,000 for York, and received Senior Athlete of the Year. The following year, 2009, after I had graduated, Kyle led his team to a third-place trophy at state after placing 2nd at conference and 1st at sectionals. Individually, Kyle was 3rd in the all-around competition, 1st on the pommel horse, 3rd on vault, and 5th on the parallel bars. As a junior, Caleb was 2nd on parallel bars and 5th on floor. Last year, now a senior, Caleb senior year, Caleb claimed the individual all-around competition, took 1st on parallel bars and 5th on vault. Nick Creel placed 9th on vault, and Tim Drahokville finished 11th on the horizontal bar. Now this year, after 3 state championships, 16 individual top 5 finishes, 6 of them being gold, 4 silver, 1 bronze, and 5 fifth-place finishes, boys gymnastics is under consideration to be cut. I'd be interested in comparing these accomplishments over the past 5 years to some other sports at York and see where boys gymnastics stands. As of now, I coach at the Elmhurst Park District and have over 150 boys involved in our program, gymnastics program, and they will eventually make their way to high school looking to compete for York. Clearly, there is still an interest in the sport of gymnastics. I have many friends, qualities, and memories from York Gymnastics program that have helped me make who I am today. YDG for life. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, our thanks to all of those individuals who have come to address the board this evening. For those that are unfamiliar with the board structure, we appreciate your input. There is no board discussion with the specific input. Some of the items you've addressed might be addressed later on if they relate specifically to an agenda item, and many of your topics were. Those that weren't, we have heard what you've had to say, but don't expect to see board discussion because they're not relating to agenda items. So with that, we will move forward and move on to the superintendent's communication. Our first discussion item is the high school graduation date.
2 meetings ago, York Principal Diana Smith shared with you a recommendation to have the high school graduation take place on Sunday, May 22nd, which at the time we knew was approximately 2 weeks before the end of the school year. We have used 2 emergency days, and now our end of the school year at this point in time will be June 3rd. So we did not come to any consensus or conclusion at that meeting with regards to the direction that the high school graduation date should go in, considering that in years forward, we will always have our school year end right slightly after Memorial Day weekend. So I guess what I wanted to bring back to the board table were an opportunity for some discussion and ideas about putting a process in place to potentially even survey our families about some additional options with regards to the graduation for this year, and hopefully setting up some expectations for years going forward with regards to trying to have some predictability with the York graduation date going forward. So I thought I'd just open it up for dialogue, see what the pleasure of the board is, and try to put a plan and process in place, one that can potentially be done somewhat expeditiously, and come to some resolution.
Any board recommendations? Mrs. Davy?
I'll jump in. So just in layman's term, because we've extended the end of school year, that means the length of time between graduation and the end of school year for the rest of the students is increased. So there are more days that the York seniors won't be in attendance, even with the scenarios we were presented. I think I recall that one of the one of the options was having, that several of the other schools looked at, was a Friday night graduation leading into Memorial Day weekend. So if families had plans for the holiday, you know, the Friday night is at least at the very beginning of it. And I guess I, as a board member, feel like it's beginning to send a very wrong message that school isn't important and to all students, and that we need to try to keep things as in sync and as aligned as possible. And I wonder if moving graduation to that Friday night, at least, you know, it helps give it several more days, actually almost another whole week of a class time. So I would throw that out there as something that I would like to see considered.
Mrs. Deroney?
Can you tell me again what the rationale is why, since seniors are taking exams anyway, why they don't take exams at the same time as every other student at York and then graduate after that?
I think what you may have heard was somewhat of a tradition that has been experienced in the past couple years where seniors have been released slightly earlier. The implementation of York Senior Finals has really been a 3 or 4 year old tradition. It hasn't been a long tradition. And that was the high school's desire to try to create more rigor and a better transition between high school and college. One of the issues is that there does need to be some time, and I'll say 24 to 48 hours based after finals are taken, for both the counselors to make sure that students, to review the grades, to make sure that every student who has taken a final, whether they've passed a course, to make sure they're eligible for graduation. So there's a little bit of time that is needed there. There is, what was shared to you at a prior meeting is that there's a perceived perception that school seems to be a little bit calmer when seniors are not there for the last week or two, so to speak, or last week. I think that, that's been some of the rationale that has been shared, Mrs. Deroney.
And what are the dates of finals now? Have they changed based on the snow days?
Well, the finals for underclassmen will have to change. If school goes until June 3rd, finals would fall most likely after the Memorial Day weekend, because you could not have underclassmen finish finals before Memorial Day weekend and then have a week left of school. So those haven't been officially changed. We are only at, February 8th. We're having this unprecedented winter. I do not know how many more emergency days we are going to be using in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I'm not hoping that we use any, but I certainly did not know we were going to have a record-setting snowstorm, is that when the school year started. So those will definitely have to change. Depending on what the high school graduation date ultimately becomes, there would have to be an adjustment to when the senior finals would be as well. Hypothetically speaking, Mrs. Davies' suggestion, if graduation moved to May 29th, you would not hold the finals the week of May 16th or May 17th.
Mr. Carlquist?
A few items. First, if you refresh my memory, when we discussed putting the school calendar in place, we've had over several years now this discussion about when the school year would end or would conclude. And I think part of this is, and this is maybe somewhat of an aside, is I would say not just for parents but for staff members alike, a matter of expectation management as to when the school year concludes. We talk about emergency days and whether we're extending the school year. And I think that what my recollection was in the discussion was that there was an end date to school, and if in fact emergency days were not used, then the school year would actually end sooner rather than extending the year. And seeing as where we've had emergency days that have been utilized and have required the school year to be, all those days utilized, I think going forward, this is, maybe it's I think it's more than semantics, but that's something that needs to be considered. And plans should be built around what the projected end of the school year is, not based on the desired end of the school year. That's point one. Point two is, as board members, parents, staff members, we all, I believe, have points of view or opinions based on preference, experience, values, our calendars, and the like. And as much as it might be tempting for us to say we'd like to see it on a Friday night or a Sunday afternoon, like to see it at 3 o'clock or 11 o'clock, like to see it outside and in this gymnasium and the like, my opinion as a board member, our job, we talk a lot about is setting policy. Those are decisions that should be made at an administrative level within the district. I think as a board member, as a board, it's our responsibility to ensure that there is a good, quality, complete process that's put in place to ensure that there is engagement of the various stakeholders to have their input. So in the form of a question, what type of engagement has there been with this year's senior class, the students and their parents, in addition to the staff perspective around what the right way to approach this is, the options, the alternatives, and the like, so that, frankly, a rather granular decision doesn't need to take place at the board table. And then that's question one. And then the second question is, I think speaking from the taxpayer's perspective, if high school seniors are released several weeks earlier than the end of the school year, for whatever reasons appropriate or the like, that's a quarter of the student population. So I'm projecting it's a quarter of staff time that is I won't say idle, but is available. How would staff time and the associated salaries that go with that great talent pool, how would it be utilized during that period of time if a quarter of the students are released nearly a couple weeks before the end of the school year?
Answer the first part of the question. There hadn't been a survey conducted of all parents and/or students and/or faculty at the high school with regards to coming forward with the recommendation of May 22nd. There were conversations, I believe, with the PTSA and potentially with student groups, student leader groups. So there is an opportunity to have that a little bit more broad-based, to have input. I think to ask for input, but to set some expectations and framework around it, I think is critical. So I think you can certainly make that wide open without the community responding to what are the board's expectations for a rigorous curriculum and a rigorous school year and accountability and the like with you, other items that you had mentioned. So that's the first part. So there is an opportunity certainly for that to happen. I think the second part is that you ask a really good question. And while some staff teach other grade levels than just seniors, for some staff, it might free up some additional periods, and what that looks like, we haven't specifically asked what that plan would look like going forward. I think that's a great question, and I think we'd want to know what that plan would look like going forward. Should there be that much time that is, open and available potentially to do other value-added projects and/or work at the high school?
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
If I can add to Mr. Carlquist's purpose of school boards, another is a connection to the community, and I would like to suggest that we reach out to the community specifically. High school graduation is a rite of passage. It's a celebration for students and their families. It seems like the choices are to keep it on May 22nd, Sunday afternoon, move it to Friday, May 27th, or even in an extreme case, to Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, June 3rd, 4th, or 5th. And then with the appropriate end of school, that the administration is more than qualified to set those dates, why don't we reach out to the families of the graduating seniors? Let's ask them what works for them, what they would prefer. Give them a multiple choice, and let's listen to the community.
Ms. Hirsch?
Full disclosure, I have a senior. I agree with the portion of Mr. Carlquist's statement that this is not something that should come to the board level. I trust that the high school administration should be able to work out the appropriate time. I think from a board member's perspective, we want to maximize instruction. We want to keep our seniors engaged as long as possible. We already have senior slide in my house. Sorry, daughter. But the other thing is, I do think it is important to maintain an academic decorum in the high school building for the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors as they go through a very important process of taking their final exams I also have a freshman, so he's going to have to take his first final year exams at the end of the year. So I trust the administration to balance those things in terms of holiday timeframes. That is a no-win situation. So I'm going to encourage you, we want to maximize instruction time. We want to provide a great environment for our students to take finals. And my daughter is going to be upset with me if you change the date, but I'm letting you decide that.
Mrs. Conroy.
It's, as long as I can remember, it's always been that the seniors took their finals and then they graduated a couple days before the rest of the kids finished. I think Mrs. Davies' proposal of Friday is a great compromise. I feel like we're kind of trying to decide here, do we want our seniors to start taking finals with the rest of the population of the high school? I personally think the past practice of allowing them to do it separately is best. I think it's worked best. And I also agree that this shouldn't be at the board table. This should have been decided long before it ever got to this point. And I don't have a senior this year.
Thank you. I also have a senior. And I agree with most of the comments here. And we've had a prior discussion. So I guess what I would ask you, Dr. Krizik, is we obviously need a process to resolve this. I don't think this is a board decision to say, make it on this date. We've talked about at length over many meetings, talking about trying to increase instruction time and maximize all of our resources. So obviously, setting the date too early isn't, I don't think, the most responsible decision, but this really needs to come from you. So I would ask for a process of how we're going to resolve this. And I also would say that we have to get this set because people make travel plans. I mean, high school graduation is a big deal for my daughter, for anybody whose kid is going through high school. So we just have to get this resolved. So I guess I would ask you, how do we move forward on this and get a decision made and communicate to the parents and then commit to it?
I think the value of the board discussion here this evening is just to kind of validate what some of your beliefs are. Your beliefs are is to optimize instructional time, to try to balance the needs of seniors with the needs of underclassmen, but not so much to exacerbate the situation. So you've really established some parameters. Certainly what can happen, following tonight's board meetings, I can certainly talk with high school principal Diana Smith. She certainly can put out a survey to senior parents. We can certainly use SurveyMonkey or a tool that's relatively easy to use to get that sent out, to compile that data. And then, based on that data, just an administrative recommendation to go forward. I do think that the other benefit to this conversation is that we do know that going forward, our school year, to Mr. Carlquist's point, is we should be planning based on what the end of the school year is, not what we would like the school year to be, and to be able to put plans in place around on that so that we don't continue to be facing these issues and make it somewhat of a moving target, but to try to create some, I'll say, new level of tradition that has some level of predictability to go forward to it. So while I applaud you for not, let's say, stepping in and making the decision itself, I think by putting some parameters and structure around it, it allows a better process to be put in place. So thank you for allowing that to come back on the agenda this evening.
Thank you. We are going to move on to our next item. And just for those who noticed, Mr. Carlquist had to leave. He's got to catch a flight for some business out of town, so he stayed for as long as he could for the meeting, but that's why he did have to leave. So we will continue with our most significant agenda item tonight, our initial discussion on our EPIRT process and our upcoming reduction levels that we'll need to make. I'll turn the microphone over to Dr. Krizik.
Thank you, Mrs. Ostajic. What you're going to hear tonight is the 2010-2011 Program Review and Ranking Results report that was assembled after lots of months of work that actually began earlier this summer when we envisioned and put together this EPIRT process. There are three people doing the presentation tonight. Mr. Fred Fox, our consultant, will begin the presentation by doing an overview of the EPIRT process, so that kind of frames the context of why we are here this evening and why we utilized this particular process, its value, and its benefits. The second part will be Ms. Masterton, who will be reviewing with you the reduction recommendations that came forth as a result of the committee reports based on a ranking process, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll end with reviewing for you some of the expenditure recommendations that were identified in the EPRT reports. Those were those level 3 reports where committees actually looked at if they had 10% additional resources, what would be those activities, actions that they would recommend that would substantively advance the program and be greatly aligned with advancing student achievement or in alignment with the strategic plan. And after those three presentations, then what we'd like to do is begin, obviously, a little bit of a conversation about establishing a reduction level so that our subsequent conversations going forward can then be much more focused in terms of how we will achieve those reductions. We have shared from the beginning that we have no real new revenue sources. We're going to have to reallocate and realign existing resources going forward. And so it might seem strange or odd to talk about both new expenditures and reductions in the same conversation, but it is all about optimizing resources to yield the best outcomes we possibly can for our students and to continue to provide the highest quality programs and services we can for our students, as we are a district that envisions ourselves to be one of the best in the country. And so we will begin this evening with Mr. Fred Fox reviewing the EPRT process itself. And before he begins, all of the 28 EPRT reports, as well as this, have been posted to board docs. And while we have handouts of tonight's PowerPoint presentation, that this PowerPoint has also been posted to board docs this evening. Mr. Fox.
Thank you. I want to start out with actually 4 pieces. We're going to talk about why the EPRT, we're going to talk a little bit about the process, we're going to talk a little bit about the results, and then I'll turn it over to Pat, and she can actually get into the real ranking results and how that plays out. The why of EPRT, last year through increased revenues and budget reductions, your district cut $2.3 million from the 2010-11 budget. Through that time, through projections, it looked like that there will be an additional $3 to $5 million reduction needed in the 2011-2012 budget. This is predominantly due to 2 things that have been occurring for quite some time, but at a much faster pace recently. First is the continued state financial problems. As you and many other districts across the state rely on state funding, and that state funding doesn't come through as it's planned, it puts a burden on the local board. And the other one is lower property tax increases. And again, this has a direct relationship to the economy and what's occurred in the last few years. So the district selected EPRT. It's a data-driven process, and its key issue is to provide the board and the administration with program information to make fiscal and educational decisions. And as you will hear several times tonight, it is a process. It is not something that comes in a can and it says this is exactly what we should do and this is exactly what the results is. It's a process that districts use over time. They become better at it over time, but keep that in mind that it is a process. When we look at how EPRT here in your district involves staff and stakeholders in a data-driven improvement process that answered the following questions. How many students are served by a program and at what cost? So you can start making a balance and an understanding of what the budget supports. Can some of the programs that you currently have be improved and those outcomes achieved at a lesser cost? How are the programs outcomes evaluated? How do you measure them? Lastly, are the district's educational priorities reflected in the budget so that the EPRT reports are directly related to the district's priorities? The key element of EPRT is an ongoing process based on evaluation and financial information that assists the board and administration in setting educational priorities. In District 205, you had volunteer staff that manned the committees to review 28 district programs and complete a program report for each one of those. As Dr. Krisick was talking about, these are the reports that are in the binders and made available. Each program report has several parts, and those include program outcomes that identify what the program is expected to accomplish. When you look at career and technical education, you can ask the question, why do we do it? Why is it there? And those outcomes are what drives the rest of the program. The program data and activities are designed to meet each outcome. What are they? How do we go about making sure that when we've identified an outcome, we have activities that support that outcome? And the data collected to measure the program's success. At the end of the day, how do we know how successful we were? Also, the program evaluation is an analysis of data to determine the extent that the outcomes were met. So those are really the what of EPRT. Each program report is written at 3 different levels, because not only is this a program evaluation for the effectiveness of the program, but it obviously looks at the relationship to the budget each year. A level 1 program report is written at a 90% level of current funding. So if the current CTE program in a district costs X number of dollars, that level 1 is going to be written at 90% of that. And a part of that level 1 then identifies the impact of that 10% reduction. A level 2 is the current level of funding. It's your current budget. If you take those 27 programs that you have and look at the total cost of your level 2 and add that all together, that then comes up to what your current budget is for those 28 programs. A level 3 is a 10% increase in the budget. The increase then again is designed to enhance the program. In each one of these levels, it's key that the impact be identified. What happens if we have to reduce? What happens if we maintain? What happens if we can increase it? Who was involved? In District 205, there were 326 staff members that participated in one or more of the EPRT committees. A total of 57 individuals participated in the ranking process. Participants included administrators and coordinators, PTA representatives, and community members. All 57 individuals ranked the 28 programs. The ranking of level 1 programs ranked from the most to the least able to sustain budgetary reductions. So when you see the sheet and you're looking at that, those in red that are level 1s, that was the thought process there. The level 2 programs show most to least significant impact on student achievement. Those most closely aligned to the strategic plan showed the most creative thinking and the use of existing resources, and that's a key part of the EPRT process. As the committees look at the level 2s, oftentimes they will identify a means or ways to offer the same program and meet the same outcomes at a reduced cost based on a program evaluation and how the program operates. Also, looking at existing resources and the operational importance of the program. The Level 3 programs were ranked from the most to least in need of adding funding to meet the district initiatives. So when you look at the Level 3 program ranking, when the individuals ranked those, they were thinking about what program would be in least need to the most need, and rank those so that those with the most need would be higher up on the listing. So that if there are resources available to improve those programs, then the board and administration has a guide for having those programs identified. All 57 ranking sheets were compiled then into a single ranking, and at this point in time, Pat will take you through that ranking and additional part of the program.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, we're going to start here with our level 2 rankings at a 10% reduction. And the way that you're going to be able to read this chart is to start at the bottom and work upward. And starting at the bottom are the programs that were ranked to be able to handle reductions, where reductions could be managed. And at the top are the programs that were ranked not able to be efficient and correct and able to be done. I can't talk tonight for some reason. Where reductions are least desirable is the easiest way for me to put it, obviously. So in between there are some lines that we've put in that show the various different levels of reduction. In the middle column is the amount of reduction that's being recommended, 10% of the total program cost. At the very bottom, you'll see a current cost of $75,487,882. That is the cost of the 28 programs currently. And then if you'll notice, as you're working backward and taking off the dollars from there, you're seeing less and less dollars. So we feel that at $3 million, there would be a budget of $72,368,582 instead of the $75 million. So that would be the $3 million reduction. Moving farther up, closer to $4 million, the budget would be $71,698,710. And if we moved even farther up to almost $6 million, the budget would be $69,597,299. So if you notice, I'm working from bottom to top. Bottom, programs where reductions could be managed. Top, where they can't be without significant effect. And I actually got that out. What do you know? So now let's start working from the bottom and talk about the actual reduction recommendations. We're taking it in ranking order from most to least able to sustain reductions. The committee rated driver's education behind the wheel as being most able to afford a reduction. The committee itself recommended reductions in benefits and supplies. The supplies for behind the wheel consist of fuel for the driver's ed cars, and benefits cannot be reduced without a corresponding reduction in salary. So instead, we would recommend a reduction in the paid hours of driving instruction for the $1,649 of savings. The next one was business finance. I'm gulping on this, but our Skyward program is our HR and finance program. This is our third year of working with the Skyward program, and we're getting pretty proficient in it. So we recommended decreasing our support hours for a reduction of $15,000. And we also recommended implementing a $3 credit card transaction for an increase in revenue of $73,915. And the total savings would be $88,915. We did look at some other districts. For instance, Naperville 203 does have a $3 credit card transaction. Currently, our cost for credit card transactions is about $3.80 in there. Just to let you know, also, last year, we also took a half-person reduction. This would be this year's reductions. Doesn't include last year's reductions in there. Transportation was the next ranked program that can sustain a reduction. The committee recommended moving early childhood transportation, which is currently purchased through a charge per child cost, to a route cost with an approximate savings of $48,000 through First Student, and also recommended eliminating EC-12 field trip transportation or charging parents for that transportation for field trips. The total savings would be $235,151. In extracurricular clubs and activities, the committee recommended either cutting the number of clubs or the stipend for clubs. However, the stipend is a collective bargaining issue. Therefore, at this time, the recommendation would be to cut the number of clubs by 10% for a total savings of $29,504. We would suggest that if those cuts were going to be made, they'd be across the board evenly and equitably. Summer school is the next program. The committee recommended an increase in summer school tuition by 7% or $11 per course, with an increase of revenue of $25,500, and they would add additional positions of a .5 summer school administrator, a .6 guidance counselor, and a .6 librarian, with an offsetting cost there. So the total savings would be $15,436. We believe there may be alternatives to addressing the guidance counselor and administrative recommendations that would incur a savings of an additional $10,000. In interscholastic sports, as we've heard tonight, the committee recommended to eliminate 7 sports for a total savings of $91,274. We do not necessarily support that recommendation, and we recommend instead evaluating the feasibility of the reduction of coaching staff, elimination of freshmen and or JV teams, and or increasing athletic fees in a tiered method in lieu of reducing all 7 sports. Communication services. The committee recommended increasing foundation share of costs by $6,749 and reducing the communication supply and purchase services budget by 44%, or $16,043, for a total savings of $22,792. However, if all the foundation costs were paid by the foundation, it would eliminate the need to cut the communication budget. Currently, we are paying $26,097 in salary and benefits for the foundation. In the health services category, the committee recommended eliminating 1 floater health aide position, eliminating summer work and first day exclusion work. First day exclusion is we have a policy of excluding students who do not have their immunizations on the first day of school. Ordinarily, by state law, that can go until October 15th. Our nurses do come in to review all of the immunization records to ensure that, and they come in over the summer. So this may require a policy change if this was to be put through. They would ask to include revenue for outdoor education nurses in the outdoor ed fee for savings of $6,900, and use agency nurses in lieu of Elmhurst Hospital for savings of $37,000, altogether a total of $96,619. At this time, we're not sure how using agency nurses would save $37,000. Music. The music group, there were many, many good reports. Music was one of the best. And this committee recommended adding a fee for band and orchestra at the high school, making it equitable with the middle school. They had also reduced staff by a .2 FTE, full-time equivalent, and reduced supply, equipment, and purchase service accounts for a total savings of $179,850. They freely admitted that they could and offered up that they could accept a reduction, which we thought was really one of the points of this whole process, was for committees to be able to say, we can afford to do this, we can find ways to do this. Administrative services, the committee recommended reducing 3 secretaries, eliminating the perimeter patrol stipend at the middle school, and eliminate lunch supervision for a total savings of $501,994. However, the elimination of cafeteria supervisors at the elementary school is not feasible, and the elimination of teacher stipends for cafeteria supervision is a contractual issue, and that adds up to $371,386. So if we're looking at reductions for this committee, we would need to send them back to find additional reductions that would work in this process. Freshman cohort. The committee recommended eliminating paid summer school transportation and tuition and reduce staffing levels by 0.6 for a total savings of $62,138. Middle school unified arts and exploratory, the committee recommended to reduce staff by 0.77 for a total savings of $61,661. In library media services, the committee recommended reductions in purchase services, books and periodicals, which was the major part of their recommendations at $162,533, and some database subscriptions for a total savings of $209,854. We feel that the book reductions would not be sustainable long-term without compromising the quality and the quantity of our collections. In world language, the committee recommended a 0.4 FTE reduction at the elementary schools, 1.0 FTE reduction in the middle school, and a 1.33 FTE reduction in the staff at the high school for a total savings of $217,674. The reduction to the elementary program does not change the level of service, but it may impact common block scheduling for literacy and math. Art was the next program recommended for reductions. The committee recommended eliminating a 0.75 FTE position and all supplies and materials for a total savings of $119,169. The 0.75 reduction would only be feasible at the middle school and high school in our opinion, and it's not feasible to eliminate all supplies and materials. While they didn't put it in their figures for their level 2, they did include in their narrative a suggestion to add student art fees to accommodate the cost of supplies. Buildings and grounds. The committee recommended reducing 11 maintenance custodial staff, preventive maintenance costs, and equipment purchases for a total savings of $858,652. I'm going to be honest and tell you that we have some really serious concerns about the level of cleanliness, safety, security, and well-being of our buildings and our students with this recommendation. We appreciate that they made the recommendation. They needed to make the recommendation as a level 1 and 2 recommendation, but we do have concerns about it. Career Tech Ed. The committee recommended adding a $20 course fee, reducing equipment expenditures by $3,500, and reducing TCD student tuitions and membership for a total savings of $121,456. We wanted to let you know, however, that we're already the unit school district with the lowest number of student admissions to TCD, and it would limit some of our students who are not offered programs of their interest that they are able to find and get at TCD. Counseling services. The committee recommended reducing 2 full-time counselors, one in the high school and one in the middle school, and reducing supplies and materials for a total savings of $195,695. Although the committee recommended one at the elementary and one at the high school, we think it's more feasible that if the mandatory guidance classes at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which are not provided at other school districts, were eliminated, both reductions could be made at the middle school. We're not recommending that the high school take a reduction in a guidance counselor. So at this point, we're now 18 programs have made reductions or recommended reductions, and that total cost is $3,119,300. So if you go back to that original, which David, you don't have to, but if you go back to that original chart that we had, you'll see that that's the first line on the chart, the bottom line on the chart. 2 more programs moved us up to almost a $4 million level. The first was PE. The committee recommended reducing 3.34 certified PE teachers in the following way: a 0.54 at the elementary, 2 full middle school teachers, and a 0.8 at the high school, for a total savings of $286,797. We have concerns already about meeting state mandates if any further reductions are made to elementary PE, however. And in technology, the committee recommended eliminating funding for brand-new classroom technology, reducing equipment repair costs, deferring network equipment replacement, deferring replacement of the remainder of the York analog TVs, deferring investigation of virtual desktop technology for lab workstations, for a total savings of $383,075. We did want to note something because we think it's important. In the next couple of months, we're going to be making recommendations for renewal of our leases for our refresh cycle for existing classroom equipment. And we're not recommending that we forego that. And we thought it important that you hear this ahead of time so that a couple of months down the road, people don't say, well, wait a minute, what happened? Why are we asking for, us to be spending money in this way? But we've been building the refresh cycle in the same way that we're building the curriculum cycle, the curriculum adoption cycle into the budgets. So now we're at the second line on that ranking sheet at $3,789,172, and a total of 20 programs have been presented to you of the 28. Our final ranking reduction recommendation, which would move us to almost $6 million in reductions, 5.9, is class size for core academic classes. The committee had identified 28.4 full-time teacher reductions. The breakdown of these reductions would be 5 at K2, 9 at 3-5, 6.8 at grades 6 through 8, and 7.6 through grades 9 through 12. That would mean maximum class sizes of 26 in grades K2, 28 in grades 3-5, 30 in grades 6 through 8, and 31 in grades 9 through 12. Those are high maximums, and we realize that. But we also wanted to provide you with the averages. In K2, there would be 21.8 students, 3-5, 24.1, 6-8, 26.6, and 9-12, 28.2. The total savings would be $2,101,411. We also felt that consideration should be given to changing class sizes at some and not all grade levels, and/or within some courses at the high school. For example, either increase class size or increase the current course minimum of 15. Additionally, if class size increases are implemented, consideration should be given to allowing lower or current class sizes for Title I at-risk schools. Altogether now, we've presented 21 programs and a total reduction of $5,890,583. I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Krizik, who's going to talk about some recommended additions.
In an effort to move us forward and meet some of the objectives in our strategic plan, it is necessary to expend additional dollars in order to achieve those initiatives. And so what you see here now is the rankings for level 3, and starting at the top would be that program that the 57 rankers perceived as having the highest priority of needing additions or a 10% increase in their budget, and then ending with driver's ed behind the wheel of having the lowest priority for additional dollars expended to advance strategic initiatives and or student achievement. We did not I'm going to summarize some of these additions, not all of them. What we did is that we looked at all 28 and we identified 8 to 10 of those. And what we did is we pulled some of the items recommended for advancement from the reports and didn't list all of them. So I'm just going to review those with you quickly. Again, the program identified as having the highest priority was curriculum and instruction. And the key and the only recommendation in that report was the restoration of the Director of Research and Assessment position, along with all the staff and equipment and support necessary to support the position for a total added expenditure of $184,666. Ancillary to this is that you know that there is a committee on looking at a data warehouse solution. It would be almost impossible for a recommendation to come forth from Dr. Sullivan and Mr. Smith on a data warehouse solution without the appropriate staff to support the implementation of that. So all of this is somewhat tied together. In reading support, the committee's recommendation was an addition of a 1.0 FT full-time reading assistant at the elementary level and the creation of 2 new full-time equivalent reading specialists at the middle school level. We would advance the recommendation for the reading specialist positions at the middle school for a total added expenditure of $128,400. We have support services, targeted support services at the elementary with reading specialists. We do have a reading strategies course for a limited number of students at the middle school, but we really do not have reading specialists specialized to address some significant needs of some of our other students. And we do believe that that is a strategic need that is necessary so that we can reduce, hopefully going forward, the amount of support students need entering the 9th grade level with regards to their literacy needs. In terms of gifted and advanced placement, the recommendation was for an increase of 3.5 reach teachers at the elementary schools, as well as recommendations for additional dollars for supplies and materials. We would recommend advancing the recommendation of the 3.5 reach teachers at the elementary level in order to further impact literacy and math instruction for all students for a total added expenditure of $245,000. And while this expenditure is coming out of what is perceived as the gifted education budget, a full-time reach teacher in each building would allow for increased use of flexible grouping at literacy and math times to essentially achieve impact on all students at all levels, not just the highest level of students, but students, regular education students, students who are at grade level, as well as students that are below grade level. Moving forward, early childhood at risk. The recommendation was to utilize district resources to maintain the current program and increasing related services by a 0.9 FTE. As was shared with you at a prior budget meeting, we are anticipating losing $100,680 of grant funding that we have to support the at-risk program because it is moving towards a competitive based grant program, and we do not perceive we are going to be considered to be competitive only because our EAV and we're not considered to be a high need district financially. We would advance the recommendation of utilizing district resources to maintain the current program for an added expenditure of the $100,680, as well as evaluate the size of the at-risk program. Currently, we add additional district dollars onto the at-risk program and serve more students than what the grant funds, and so we'd need to kind of look at balancing that out going forward. With regards to the bilingual program, there was a recommendation of an additional 1.3 full-time equivalent certified ELL teachers. At this point in time, we would not advance this recommendation. Should the ELL population grow and it is a student-based with needs, that may come in future years. But we believe that the addition of the ELL teachers last year to put us in compliance with state mandates, we are more than adequately serving the needs of our students. With regard to technology, there was a recommendation of the addition of 3.0 instructional technology support staff, additional equipment, and software, as well as additional professional development for tech staff. At this point in time, we would advance the recommendation of the addition of the 3.0 certified personnel to assist in classroom technology integration for an additional cost of approximately $240,000. Kathy Baker is our instructional support specialist who is currently servicing 13 schools. And if we are looking to further embed and advance the utilization of technology, then we need to find other ways of supporting teachers in utilizing technology to advance student achievement. In the area of related services, the recommendation was for 3.5 new FTE-related service positions, as well as additional supply and professional development dollars. At this point in time, we would only advance the recommendation of the addition of 1.5 FTE psychologists for a total addition, new expenditure of $110,000. What this would do is certainly put our psychologist-to-student ratio more in alignment with recommended practices, but it would also provide more support for response to intervention strategies, as well as assisting teams with data review to further enhance making instructional change. In the area of special education, the committee recommended an addition of 5.5 additional new staff. However, we would only advance restoring the REAL program at the high school to a full-day program with the addition of a .2 social worker and a .2 classroom teacher in order to have the full continuum of special education services available at the high school for an additional cost of $30,000. We believe that by providing that full continuum of services, it would reduce the number of students that we are outplacing, which would have the added benefit of reducing those out-of-district tuition costs, as well as provide students to remain connected in their home school to allow them to participate in activities, again, better grounding them in their home school. So we are currently advancing total new expenditures of $1,038,746 at this point in time. However, as you saw from the reports, each of the 28 program advanced a 10% reduction. We did not advance all of a 10% addition. We did not advance all of those 10% additions. We chose, again, the ones that were ranked the highest on the list based on the participants, and the ones that we felt had the most strategic impact on, again, being most student-centered and most closely in alignment with the strategic plan. So that is the crux of tonight's presentation. Mr. Fox's review of the process, Ms. Masterton's review of the reductions, and then just my quick overview of the new expenditure reductions. Our next steps, not all to be done this evening, are to identify and set a reduction level, identify and determine what those reductions will be, and then identify and determine what any new expenditure additions will be. So now we'll open it up for questions, comments, and discussion.
Mrs. Deroney?
I first want to thank everybody who was involved in this process. It's an incredible process. As I was reading through the book, I felt as though the district had been put into an MRI machine, and we were able to slice and dice and look at programs and take a look at pieces of it. And while MRIs don't always tell the whole story, we have so much more information now than we did. You know, some of the reports were better than others. Obviously, it's a process, it's a starting point, but to all of the people who engaged in this, thank you. It is so much more information for the board to have, to be able to look at and make some of the tough decisions that we have to make. I just was very impressed with the process, the reports, and all of the time that everybody put in. I know it was a strain on the administration as well. All the community members who helped, it's a fabulous tool to have. And I just wanted to say that before we drilled down and started talking about what was wrong with it. You know, I mean, just it's a fabulous place to be at this point.
I wanted to just ask a couple process questions, and I know you introduced this to us several months ago before we started going through it. But can you just talk a little bit about how the committees were formed, and also, so the committees gave the presentation to the rankers, and what was that process like? Just so we have an understanding of the whole thing. And I guess the final piece is, the recommendations came back from that, but there have been some changes. You've talked about the how some of the recommendations were modified slightly for the ads, but I think even from the cuts, there might have been some changes, and maybe they were all restrictions that we couldn't do, but there was a couple of flavor changes in there too. So I just from the perspective of everybody that's following this on the board, just to really understand how that all laid out.
Sometime in September, we had put out all of the list of the EBRD committees, and all staff had the opportunity to participate in as many committees as their schedules and time could account for. Obviously, with the magnitude of the number of committees, some of the committees met at competing times, which did force people to choose between committee participation. But all staff, all 1,000 staff members had the opportunity to participate on as many EBRD committees as they were interested in. And so it was an open process. You didn't apply for it. If you wanted to participate, you participated. That was that process. The second piece is, the second question is that once all the committee reports were assembled, there was somewhat of an editing process where they were first submitted, and some of the reports were sent back for some editing pieces. We did not substantively change or make substantive recommendations to change what the committees had recommended, because none of us sat down in the rooms where there were the discussion. So it would be disingenuous to the process to then override those recommendations while they were in the process of putting together their reports. All 57 committee members read every single report, and then basically listened to, over a series of 4 nights, a 15-minute presentation. The perception was, in some cases, the presentations were provided additional perspective on the content that was written, and for some people did not provide an additional perspective in order to help them make a decision. It was really the written reports that I think drove, for the most part, how individuals chose to engage in the ranking. Individuals had about 72 hours to rank level 1, level 2, and level 3 programs. And then those individual ranking sheets were then, Mr. Smith and I spent a Sunday afternoon here on a Bears game day. Thank God he's a hockey fan. But we then compiled all those to come up with a ranking sheet. What you saw this evening is that we have not changed any of the recommendations for reductions and/or increases. We've given you some editorial comments with regards to what some of those recommendations were. There were guidelines given to the committees, i.e., it was recommended that their recommendations shouldn't be contractual in nature, because that's subject to collective bargaining, and that's not something the board can make a decision at the table. They should have looked at the feasibility of their recommendations. They should have looked at impact. As Mr. Fox talked about, the impact statements are going to be critical going forward. And while we gave everyone the 10% limit, there was always an opportunity to identify things that might have been one-time reductions that someone could have taken out beyond the 10%. That was always an option available to everyone. What we have done with the program additions is that we're not disingenuous to the process. We've listed what those program additions were. We've just highlighted for you what we believe might have the greatest impact. By no means do those editorialized comments mean those are the only additions that you should consider, because you have the full reports and we've kind of summarized what those additions were. Again, it's just an opportunity to begin to focus the conversations somewhat. We also wanted to try to set somewhat of a realistic expenditure target. understanding that as you increase expenditures, you are also increasing your reductions in order to get to that point, or you are setting a lower reduction target if you are going to be adding new expenditures. So again, once everything that was in the committee reports in terms of their reduction recommendations or expenditure recommendations have been clearly noted here in this presentation.
And I'll open this up for board discussion, but I just want to maybe kind of lay, you talked earlier about expectations for tonight. So really, the primary focus is narrowing down to really what level of cut we need to make. But as you go through some of these things, the rankers had the ability to rank what was presented to them. So if there was a way that you would look at it differently, or, as we're sitting at board, not to discount the value of the work that was done by the committees, but, as you identified, some of the things that were put out there weren't feasible. You can't impact contract things. So how would you envision this discussion going forward, I guess is my question.
Well, I think the first part of the discussion is really a follow-up to Ms. Masterton's presentation from 2 weeks ago about what your 5-year budget recommendations were, and what the impact of a $3 million reduction would do 5 years going out, all things based on her assumptions staying the same, what a $4 million going out would look like, and what a $5 million going out would look like. That's really where I really do believe that your conversation needs to begin this evening, not on the efficacy of any of the recommendations, not on the ability to impact not on any decisions with regards to what will make up those reductions. That should come at a subsequent meeting. Having read reports and heard the presentation, I really think that reading the reports, you captured the essence. There was not an opportunity in the presentations for a Q&A. There was no opportunities for participants to ask the committee to further elaborate and or explain on their rationale, or why didn't they look at this, or could they have looked at this. That was not part of the process. So there's nothing that you may have not been exposed to, because that wasn't there was no dialogue. It was a one-way presentation. It was basically to give the committee just an opportunity to just reinforce the key points of their presentation. Those reports they're long. Some are 30 pages, some are longer. And that's really all that really did in that piece. Debriefing in the process, whether or not we go forward with committee presentations, is something we'll debrief on in the process, whether or not it was truly value added or not. So we don't know if that will go forward in the process, a presentation component to all of this. But I do think your focus needs to be on, first setting a reduction level, and then after this meeting, using the information contained within the reports and additional suggestions that have come forward to begin to put forward what that package of reductions and new expenditures looks like. But you can't begin to even discuss what reductions you believe are consistent with your beliefs, inconsistent with your beliefs, until you set a reduction level. You'd be working backwards.
Mrs. Deroney.
The last meeting, you, Ms. Masterton, told us that you would be comfortable with a $3 million to $4 million reduction in the budget, given all the things that we're looking at right now. The inability of the state to ensure that we're going to get what we have, the taxes, the CPI being what it is, all the things that go into balancing the budget at the end of the year. The cash flow requirements, you told us you needed $3 to $4 million. I'm hearing, Dr. Krzyk, you say that the administration would like to add about $1 million worth of things to keep us in line with the strategic plan, keep us in line with improvement. So in my mind, we're looking at a $4 to $5 million reduction, period. I mean, I don't see how we can even consider the lowest one because it isn't going to get us both balancing the budget and moving the district forward. So I think I would suggest that our only decision is between the $4 million or the 3.7 or the 5.8 figures on our sheet here.
Ms. Hirsch.
When I apologize, I missed the meeting on January 25th, but I've gone back and watched the video so that I could capture the board discussion at the table, and I've gone back and looked at the PMA numbers, which are our projections moving forward. And first, I have a question, Dr. Krzyk. When we look at the aggregate, at the projection, we look at our projected expenditures for next year, the total number of revenue is $98 million, and the expenditures are $96 million. So my first question is, can you please help us understand the differential between the $96 million of our projected expenditures for next year and the $75 million, which I believe is the number that we had taken into consideration through the EPERT process? Not that we're looking individually, but the volume of the programming that we evaluated in EPERT was $75 million, and our total expenditures are expected to be $96. So first, can you explain the difference?
So where is the 20 million is the question. The 20 million comes from a variety of different areas. We did not review every single program that we offer. So for example, human resources, which comprises approximately $600,000, was not a program reviewed. We did not review the board services budget, which I don't have that figure in front of me. We did not review the Office of the Superintendent's budget. We did not review food services. We did not account for our bond payments of the 20 million, which is somewhere between $6 and $8 million in bond payments. We did not look, the 20 million includes some of our insurances, our liability insurances, our tort insurance. Some of those components make up the 20 million. Those are some of the big pieces of the 20 million. Some of those not subject to an EPERT process. Your insurance costs are not subject to an EPERT process. Food service is a program that we are operating in the black. And as you know, that's how we're going forward with that program. So at this point in time, we didn't put food service through a programmatic review. In our consulting in the process, it would have been humanly impossible to put every program the first time just because of the magnitude of the time and the capacity of the administrators to facilitate multiple review processes. So we chose the ones that we felt had the greatest impact on, one, our strategic plan, two, were the most closely connected to student achievement, and really just kind of reflected the full realm of what our operational programs and services were. So that's where some of the 20 million came from.
My second question, it's again, I'm kind of starting at the biggest picture and working my way in. When I look at our expected expenditures, salary and benefit costs for next year are approximately $77 million, and other costs are about $18.6 million. So the vast majority of our budget is contractual salary and benefit costs, which we have limited control over. Is that accurate?
It is accurate, and what it reflects is how lean, really, of a budget that we do have. That there aren't very rich supply, equipment, purchase service budgets to go into to try to be able to find $3 to $5 million. So yes, a significant portion of our budget is controlled by personnel costs.
Okay, and then I'm still working from the big picture, working on down. If we're looking at our revenues of 98 million, our expenditures of 96 million, the bottom line is we want to make sure that we have adequate fund balances to get the district through the school year. And our fund balances are really kind of like our checking account balance, and our low point is what we're concerned with. We don't want to have to borrow funds. So given these PMA numbers that I'm looking at from the last meeting, I apologize, I'm catching up. Our low fund balance point would be a negative, it would be $111,000 at the end of May for the next school year, not this coming May, but a year from May. So the point is, we don't have enough money to pay the bills for next school year, so we need to make some changes. I also want to confirm, either Dr. Krizik or Ms. Masterton, if you can confirm for me the assumptions that were built into the, not only for next fiscal year, but the years out, in terms of the assumptions that have been built into this budget in terms of teachers' salaries, which we're in the process of negotiating right now. We currently have contracts in place for PSRP and custodial, and any other assumptions in terms of CPI and in terms of other things. I realize the state, we're not 100% confident, but all of these pieces fit together in terms of helping us understand what the appropriate budget cut should be.
Before I turn it over to Ms. Masterton to review the assumptions, I just want to make another point. It is not just trying to mitigate not having to use tax anticipation warrants to be able to pay our bills, but to be in a fiscal health position that does not adversely affect our financial rating, which in turn would affect our bond rating. So currently, we have, we had actually escalated over the past couple years our ability to be designated as financial recognition. Our cash flow issues is going to decrease our rating, which ultimately then leads to what your potential bond rating is. And if at any point in time, in the next 2 to 5 years, this district is looking to go out for any, a major, or, to secure any additional dollars through a borrowing standpoint, you want to be able to do it at the lowest cost possible because you're paying it over such a long period of time. So it is not just, it's more complicated than just being able to avoid tax anticipation warrants. It is looking at all of the other impacts that your financial rating has. So your fiscal health really touches so many different things that are kind of invisible to the day-to-day operations of things, but it's things that administratively and as a board you have to be forward thinking on. So the decisions that you're making today, this year, are going to affect whoever is sitting at this table in 3 to 5 years, what their options and choices are, should they be faced with having to go out to borrow significant dollars to address capital projects. So I just needed to make sure that we understand that this is not as simple as making a decision for the FY11-12 budget. It's much bigger than that. Pat?
Okay, the projections that we put together and presented last time included a 1.5% CPI for next year, 1.3 for 2011, which would be 2012, and a 1.5 thereafter. We also removed a $100,680, oops, just lost it, in early childhood grant dollars. We just talked about that. And we reduced the amount of bilingual and special ed state grants by 10 and 20% respectively. And just as a little note, we've heard some additional information in the last week, and in fact, Karen just shared some information with me in the last hour, that we're now hearing that the federal government will be reducing funding by 20%. We talked last time about the state only increasing by 2% in future years. That was part of the agreement with the increase in taxes. And we have been told that we will probably see the first quarter categorical payments only this year. So second, third, and fourth quarter payments will not be coming. Next year, we'll probably see second and third from this year and first from next year. And maybe by the third or fourth year, they'll actually be caught up to actually giving 4 payments, but those will be 2-year-old payments that'll be coming in. So these are the things that we're kind of dealing with and working with this. The other thing that we're hearing and are concerned about is the push on retirement and the changes that are being projected. It's going to be happening in the next couple of years with the legislature in terms of teacher retirement. Those teacher retirement changes could mean significant dollar costs for school districts in the realm of Social Security benefits. So that would be an additional 6. Right now it's 4, but an additional 6% of costs, which is about $3 million. So I know that $3 million, asking for $3 million when we're only looking at a low cash point of minus $100,000 sounds like a lot of money. But what we're trying to ensure is that this doesn't have to be done every single year. Should the EPRT be done every single year on various different programs? Yes. Just for being able to review programs, just to make sure that programs are running effectively and they're doing a good job and they're enhancing student learning. Those are all things that are really important. And if the reductions can be made from it, that's super too. Or if additions need to be made to it. Those are the things that we need to know. But what we don't want to have to see are these wholesale, large-scale staff reductions every single year. And having a balance that builds is really what we need to see going forward. The projections that we have right now are based on 0% increase. We don't know what the increase is for teachers. The rest of the staff, we have bargaining unit agreements for 75% of the CPI, so that's built in. And we have administrator increases that we built in at 1%. As you know, administrators took a freeze, as did the PSRP this year. So those are the actual salary increases that are included in there. Do we believe that for 5 years we're going to be able to maintain a no addition for teachers? No, we don't believe that. But we can't project what those increases are going to be or what they're not going to be because right now we're in collective bargaining. And so rather than try to extrapolate what we really don't know in any way, shape, or form, we left it at 0. So anything above 0 obviously is going to increase that negative fund balance in there. At least, whenever those additions or increases might occur in there.
Thank you. Mrs. Davy?
I think that there are school districts all over the state struggling with exactly what we're doing. I mean, we get a daily report of out of the communications office of newspaper articles and links to other relevant school district actions, and we're seeing a lot of meetings popping up with community input, with budgets that school districts have already decided to just take drastic cuts. I have not seen any that have involved a process as detailed as we are giving our community. And so I hope there's an appreciation that we are working hard to make good decisions. And so echoing what Mrs. Deroni said, I want to thank everyone that's been a part of this process. We heard tonight either a program was either at a reduction level or an enhancement level, that there was a line drawn, and I understand the process. I guess what I'm wondering is, are there any times when the lines can cross, and there can be a program that you might need to make some additions to, but you can also have some reductions to, because we didn't hear that, and I'm wondering, because to me that's what becomes the important thing about some of these programs is, are they using their resources wisely, the best way, getting the best bang for the buck, getting the best student achievement outcome in most cases. Go ahead.
Actually, technology did exactly that. That was probably the one that we recommended 3 new instructional technologists, but we also agreed that there could be some reductions in terms of brand new classroom technology and various other issues in there. So there was somewhere in the range of $345,000 in reductions, and then we countered with $240,000 worth of additions in technology. So yes, the process does allow for restructuring or reallocating of the resources that we have. And in fact, more than one committee did make some recommendations of reallocation of resources, even on a no-cost level, which was very interesting concept.
Well, I guess I'd like to, I'm sure that, maybe even at the next meeting, we'll start to see some of the impacts of the gives and the takes, I think put together. This was helpful tonight just to see, the ranking process, but I think that, I'd like to, drill down into how the administration is going to recommend, some of the gives and takes.
And to elaborate on that, it doesn't mean that you can't take reductions above the line either. So all this does is give you a perspective. And there's an opportunity to take reductions above the line in order to reach your targeted amount as well. So this gives you a framework. It's a tool. It's a framework. And, you might, again, tonight we're not going to talk about how we're going to get there. It's not the how we're going to get there. But your point's well taken. There can be, we can certainly bring forth, while curriculum and instruction didn't come, at a certain line to be able to take reductions, it doesn't mean curriculum and instruction isn't going to come back and saying, here's some additional savings that we think we can take out of our budget. It doesn't mean that, it means that there may be an opportunity for some additional reductions to come forward as well in this process.
Just to finish, I think that we are all looking for these reductions to have the least impact on students, and we want to know that the dollars we are spending have the most impact on students and to student achievement. So I'm sure we are all saying the same thing. So I'm hopeful that as we go forward that we can, synthesize what we've heard. And you said that, I think that the one thing you said that when the committees made the presentation, there wasn't an opportunity for Q&A. And there are a couple of these reports that I think just beg for a few questions. One, the athletic report didn't address an across-the-board reduction. They cherry-picked some sports, that with it was data-driven, but it was just specific. So is there going to be an opportunity for either administrators to probe more deeply into some of these and ask those questions, or for the board? What's going to be the process for that?
As it relates to process, jumping ahead, if any recommendations, again, are viewed as unacceptable by the board, certainly there's an opportunity to be able to say, can that committee go back and generate some additional recommendations that equal the 10% reduction or equal a 5% reduction, and let the committee come back and recommend those. There is an opportunity for that to happen. But you have to get to that point of looking at those and saying, as hard as some things are, is it acceptable or not? You heard some recommendations this evening. Can there be 10% reduction across, can all sports take the same 10% reduction, everybody sharing the pain? Could there be a tiered fee structure? You heard some of those things. But rather than, again, having that kind of conversation decisions, it can be, your feedback can say is that this level, we understand that there can be 10% reduction taken out of, I'll use interscholastic sports to use your example, but we want to see it done in a different way. Can the committee recommend another recommendation? So that's feasible. And that's part of the process, because it is a process. But that was their best recommendation to come forth. Whether or not it's acceptable or unacceptable is for the board to decide.
Mr. Collins.
First of all, maybe to repeat and rephrase something that Mrs. Davies said, is that every school district in the state of Illinois is going through this same tumultuous process, perhaps in different ways. And if there's a silver lining to the dark cloud that we're in the middle of right now, it's that I think the district that makes the best decisions over the next few years can advance their student achievement while reducing their costs. And I firmly believe that that should be our objective here. Also, to Mrs. Davies' point, I believe there is a lot of value in Q&A. Is it possible for the board to send a few of these suggestions back to a committee with some questions and answers, or like, have you looked at this? And if you're interested in a concrete example, I heard here tonight from Mr. Schneider that what about combining sports programs with another school in some of these declining sports? I think that was terrific out-of-the-box thinking. The one thing that, in the limited things that I heard from EPERT committee members, was that there was very little out-of-the-box thinking in the committee reports. So is there a way in our process to send some things back and perhaps suggest some out-of-the-box thinking?
Well, there's certainly an opportunity to generate questions to be sent back to committees to be able to elaborate and answer on what some of their thinking is. There's certainly an opportunity for those questions from you to be filtered back to those committees. Yes, the answer to that is yes.
Is there a possibility to, in some of these other suggestions, expand the scope of the committee's work? For instance, if you're looking for a concrete example, the Driver's Ed Committee looked at the behind the wheel section. As I understand, there's two components to Driver's Ed, behind the wheel and what I'll call behind the desk. We didn't look at the behind the desk component. We're suggesting spending less on expenses, which sounds like less behind the wheel time if you can afford less gas. I have to believe there's a better, more encompassing, out-of-the-box approach to give our kids the valuable behind-the-wheel experience they need while achieving the goals of the program.
Certainly, there is an opportunity to take a broader look at programs based on this, in this conversation. So the answer to that is yes as well.
Okay.
There might be an additional opportunity for additional savings by expanding the scope of that. The answer is yes.
Okay. And then changing topics. Ms. Masterton, I'm just going through my notes as Mrs. Hirsch brought up from our last meeting. I asked, in order to retain our financial recognition status, what level of cash balance would you suggest our low cash point? And I just want to confirm, is that, do you still feel it's $3 million? And at the time you felt that $3 million in cuts correlated to $3 million in cash?
No, I agree that $3 million as our low cash point would provide us with enough cushion to weather the financial storms from the state and the federal government, as well as any legislative changes that may go by, as well as any CPI anomalies that happen in there. What I said was $3 million as my lowest cash point doesn't necessarily return to $3 million in reductions, because if we're having additions...
Oh, you're a step ahead of me as usual.
If we're having $1 million worth of additions, then we need $4 million worth of reductions in that.
Okay.
That's really the way that I would look at it in terms of that.
All right. Well, once again, you're a step ahead of me. So as I look at my notes, $3 million of a low cash point balance would achieve our financial recognition status to achieve maintaining our bond rating. And then you have to add to that any additional expenditures we're looking at. So net, if you call that a net $3 million reduction, and is that's still what you're comfortable with? Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Mrs. Conroy?
Ms. Masterton, can you explain, when we're talking about financial recognition and our bond rating, is there any cushion in there in terms of if we haven't always received financial recognition? How much, and accolades are wonderful. We all want to have the accolades, but I don't want to have accolades at the cost of losing programs. Is there a cushion there where if we don't receive financial recognition, and what does that look like if we don't? How much does that, and at what point does that affect our bond rating?
Well, the state issues financial ratings based on a number of different factors. The amount of debt that we have, long-term debt, the amount of short-term debt we have, the amount of days that we have cash on hand. Fund balance is a ratio of revenue. Fund balance is a ratio of expenditure. So those are all things that are rated on there. So when you go into financial review, which is what this is, you then begin to have to build long-term projections, up to 10 years long, that say, how are you going to take care of this problem? How are you going to deal with this problem? What are you going to do to make this a better program? So it's not just the bond thing. You might, and I mean, in olden days, before all of this happened, you could buy insurance at a very cheap rate, bond insurance at a fairly cheap rate, and raise your rating level by 1. And it was worth doing it because in the long run you saved a terrific amount of money. But the bottom dropped out of that, and you can't do that anymore. And so really the only way that you can do that is by having enough money on hand that the bond companies and the bond rating companies feel comfortable that, number one, you have effective financial management, that you have healthy economy within your area, which is also a big portion of all of that. They rate you on that, on your economy, and your rating in terms of all the things that the bond rating looked at is the same thing that the state is basically looking at. So is there some wiggle room? Probably. You could go and make a presentation in New York or a presentation, with Standards & Poor here and have them come in. We've done this, and our bond person helps us to make us sound wonderful, and we can probably do well, but we'll do even better when we have money in the bank. That is really the thing, and that they are going to be looking at is effective financial management, where you're not reaching these lows, that you're away and not close to these tax anticipation warrants, that you can weather these storms. That's really what they're looking for. They don't want you to build up huge fund balances, and that is not something that anyone would recommend. But just have enough money to weather the storms, and they'd be comfortable with that.
Let's make one comment. Mr. Fox said it earlier, and Mr. Collins kind of alluded to it in one of his comments, that one of the goals or outcomes of the Ebert process is there a way to reduce expenditures while maintaining or improving outcomes? There shouldn't be an assumption that the dollars you're spending today can't be reduced to get improved outcomes or to maintain the same outcomes. So, I mean, that's a critical piece to the process. Just because we're spending X amount of dollars on a program today doesn't mean there can't be some efficiencies that are found that, again, to Mrs. Davies' point, we want to simultaneously mitigate any adverse impact while also improving our outcomes. So, you're trying to find a balance between those two things. So I just think we have to keep that in the back of our mind kind of going forward, that reductions don't necessarily mean adverse impact. Reductions might just be a wise reallocation of resources while not adversely affecting any outcomes. So, do you know what I'm saying? And Mr. Fox said that earlier, Mr. Collins has brought it up, Mrs. Davy has brought that up. I do think that, that is part of some of where we're going with the ultimate decisions And one of the pieces to EBERT reports that we have to further develop is, until we have more data, and as you saw for some of the reports, not all of the programs had data to substantiate what their program outcomes were. But yet we are continuing to expend X amount of dollars without knowing, well, what if we reduced it by 10%? Could we maybe even improve our outcomes? Or, in some cases, there wasn't even enough data to substantiate the expenditures that we were having. So, again, all those things to keep in balance.
I'm going to reiterate the initial comments that Mrs. Deroni, I think, made. Just tremendous thanks to, I can't even imagine how much time was invested in this on the behalf of the committee members and the community members and administrators, all those involved in the ranking. This, to me, was hugely valuable because when we were going through this process last year, we really were going on a lot of gut, and we didn't have a lot of information. It made us hesitant to make the cuts. I think this puts us in a much better place. But we learned when we started this process, the first year is the roughest year. I would say we've got definitely models of the best practice in here, and I would hope that some of the reports that weren't as substantial, it's because they didn't necessarily have the model to follow, and we would see something more substantial. The other thing of note is, other than maybe a few duplications of budgets or some things that were easy, we don't need this training anymore, we feel strong, there's nothing in here that is really fat or rich. We're really cutting pretty deep in all the programs. When each of the groups had to say what I would do with the 10% and look at the implications of that, most of them felt very personal, areas close to their hearts, but their reactions were very strong about that. And the approach here was at a 10% level. So I guess my first question is there anywhere where a recommendation might come to go deeper than that? And I know the groups had the opportunity to offer up more, but that really when you look at it and say, okay, I didn't really support this substantially, 10% of something that's not achieving what it should, maybe that's not the right number. And I know, again, that isn't really the approach or the structure of the EPERT, but this is something that we're learning from. I think we really need to look at all the options. And this year, what we have, which is much better than last year, is at least an understanding of what these things are, what to some degree they're supposed to accomplish, to a large extent for some of the programs and lesser extent for others, how we're doing on that. But again, I would expect the group looking at this next year to see more strength than some of the weaker reports. But can you just provide a response to that?
When we entered this process, we had some decisions to make. Were we only going to have committees work on reductions of 10% reductions and then 20% reductions and no increases? I think Batavia did that last year. I think they did something like a 10% and a 20% reduction, or a 15 and a 30, or some 10 and 25. And that's all they looked at, is they were only looking at reductions. We felt as a district that we should look at both new expenditures and reductions. So right now, in this year's process, there isn't time to go back to committees and now say, take a look at your reports and give us 15%, give us 20%. We don't have there's not enough time for that to happen. So in this year's process, that can't happen, okay? In this year's process, that can't happen. Going forward, certainly if in next year's EPERT process, it's not about identifying new expenditures, but only at looking at different levels of reduction. Then you'll have those variability levels of reductions. What would it look like if it went deeper, again, than a set level of 10%? Or maybe it's 5% and 15%. Those percentages would be determined next year based on the direction that we're headed in. But there is not, again, an opportunity to go back to every 28 committees and saying, can you now go deeper? Okay.
No, I appreciate that. And I guess I just wanted to ask the question of, did anybody see any low-hanging fruit? I'm sure there were some opinions as you were going through that. I also appreciate the fact that this was a process that was defined up front. It was followed through with integrity, that there was a consistent approach, and it was equitable across all the programs to the degree that it's making the recommendation at the same percentage impact for all of them. So, Ms. Hurst, did you have another question?
I'm just trying to wrap back around to the actual reduction amount. And I think we have a lot of discussion still yet to come on, even at the individual report level overall. I do have some comments. I think there was huge value, I'm imagining, to the staff people who had to sit through these meetings and stare at their coworkers and, first of all, share information about programming at different building levels between elementary, middle, and high school. I think one of the huge strengths is looking at programs from EC to 12. I think that I'm going to guess that there were a lot of surprises. Really? You do that? Really? So I think from one of the softer sides in terms of the strength of the district of understanding our programs from a broader scale, from understanding and hopefully gaining some efficiencies, I think there's probably a lot of anecdotal learning that went on and shared across teams and probably across EPERT teams. And I think that's something I don't want to underestimate the value that that provides not only to the board in terms of seeing this level of documentation, but to the teams themselves. And we can talk about that at a later point in time when we talk about a little bit more about the process. But I'm trying to wrap back around to the setting a reduction level, which it was my understanding that that was one of our goals tonight. The one thing that I will say, Mr. Collins had teed up a $3 million net number. I am more conservative on our additions to our curriculum. I think part of the EPERT process is looking internally at our programs and evaluating where we have efficiencies, where we have some inefficiencies, how we can improve the programs that we evaluated, and how we can make improvements on the 28 aspects, which are very broad-reaching, and how we can improve those and include, budget cuts tied to that. I am not as bullish on going into the Tier 3 portion of the ranking sheet, where we are, at the same time as we are cutting back, and we admit, I believe, cutting back pretty close to the bone in terms of we're pretty lean, that we're looking to outlay additional expenditures without making sure that our cuts are accurate, on track, and we are doing everything we can to minimize the impact on student achievement with those cuts. So I am not quite as bullish on looking to add $1 million of additional new expenditures back into the mix.
Okay, so I hear the 3 million, is that where you're at, $3 million?
I agree that we need to have avoid tax anticipation warrants. I am concerned about our bond rating. I don't know if we are 1 year of we don't make the highest recognition for bond rating, if that's going to affect us in the long term. I don't see, although we do have some serious capital concerns on the out years, I don't see that that's anything that's going to be coming up this coming fiscal year or the immediate year following that. And so I am a little more conservative. I'm not looking to add in new programs and new expenditures. I'm looking to stay with maintaining a $2 to $3 million fund balance at the end of the year, and creating and identifying cuts to meet that fund balance goal.
Mrs. Davy?
I'd like to weigh in on this. I think it's irresponsible of us not to look at additions. And that's why I appreciated this process, because I think that it's very short-sighted just to look at cut. I think that we are always the district looking to advance student achievement, to stretch ourselves, to be innovative. That's all in our strategic plan. And therefore, I was happy to see at the additions, because it shows us a different way of spending our resources that the staff has identified will be helpful, successful, and important in student achievement. So therefore, and I look at the list of additions, and they didn't take them all carte blanche. They have reduced them just to, the $1 million, and it was a much larger number if they would have just uniformly accepted everything. I think our administration was very thoughtful in the things that they thought we needed to add back in. I think it's critical that we include that when we're making this budget reduction amount. And so I would support the net 3, which means cutting 4, adding 1 to get to the 3. That I think that's at a minimum, and I think Ms. Masterton would like it even higher than that. So, but I did hear you say you'd like to see a $3 million balance, and so that I'm weighing in with that recommendation.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
I largely want to reiterate many things that Mrs. Davies said. I did it before, so I'll do it again. Again, we should switch. That the benefit of this EPIRT process, and I believe that as we continue to do it, it will get more elegant in its execution. But the benefit to our school district is the reallocation of resources for a better outcome. Industry does this every year. I think it's a tremendous exercise that we should engage in every year. And again, just to reiterate, I would support Ms. Masterton's net $3 million reduction. I think in future meetings, we can debate what gets cut, how much gets cut, what gets added in. But I think the bond rating agencies, and having a little bit of experience in this area, do look at your past performance as an indication of what you will do in the future. So I support that $3 million net reduction, and we can debate in future meetings what exactly that entails.
I'm going to go Mrs. Conroy and then Mrs. Durrani.
I think where I'm a little bit uncomfortable is that we seem to be scrutinizing the cuts, and the ads. I think we need to look at them a little bit closer. I don't think we need to just take the whole sum of all of them and say this is to be pushed through. I think they should be looked at just as closely as we're looking at the cuts. And in terms of the dollar amount, I'm apprehensive to go with Ms. Davy and Mr. Collins because I feel like there's a little bit of give room there. I think that I'm concerned we're going to cut things that don't need to be cut, and I feel like we need to walk somewhat of a fine line here. Last year, I was more inclined to go with the higher cut. This year, I'm concerned we're going to cut things that will never come back. So I want to be a little bit more thoughtful about the process. And while I understand our bond rating is very important, I'm not as concerned about the financial recognition accolades. I just want to be thoughtful in the process. I want to be sure that we maintain our fund balances, but I don't think, I'm concerned we're trying to secure too large of a fund balance at the cost of some of our programs. So I'm struggling with which level of cuts I'm comfortable with.
Thank you. And Mrs. Conroy, I'm getting tired. We will have, I think that the conversation here is we're not going to debate the specifics of where the cuts are and the additions, that will come later. So whatever the net number is, we know that whatever we choose to add, whether it's to go with these recommendations or something more or less, that we're going to have to find that somewhere else. So those two pieces will have to come in tandem. So what we're really looking for now is, at the end of the day, what is going to be the cut number, knowing that if we add anything, we have to cover that in another place. I'm going to let you process, and I'm going to go to Mrs. Durrani.
I'm going to weigh in with the net $3 million, and I absolutely agree with you that we would almost be wasting the EPIRT process if we didn't include some of the enhancements, some of the advances that the committees have recognized as being important, as being part of our strategic plan and moving us forward. So I would go with the net 3, where basically I think we're going to end up cutting 4 and adding $1 million in.
Okay, I'm going to roll the line, and we're going to go, so that, I guess, is the direction. We're looking for net 3, so I'm not sure that that gives you all the information, because without being on the same page as far as how much the increased number is, but at least it's a range. And I guess I would believe that in looking through some of these, there might be other areas of flexibility. So I would just encourage bringing forth all ideas. We did hear some great ideas, some suggestions for out-of-the-box thinking, and I think this is a great opportunity to do that. And this EPERT process is a tool. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it's a fantastic tool. I mean, I think and again, thanks for the effort, and Mr. Fox for staying with us so late this evening. And we actually have another agenda item after you, so you're not in the worst shape tonight. But Ms. Masterton.
I just want to add to that, although, we are having this discussion right now, and we're talking about major items, we never stop looking for ways to do things more efficiently and save money. We never stop doing that. We will find more during the budget process. When we're actually doing the budget, we'll find more. We'll probably find some additional expenditures too, because that's just the way things go, but we always keep looking for that. So that's an ongoing process that goes on all year. So I think you're right, that we are going to find some other things.
Can I ask a process question? I think it came up. From this point, if board members have more specific things that they would like the administration to funnel back to the committees, is that appropriate now for them to push them to you? And then you'll manage that, because I'm guessing some of us will have the same questions. So you'll manage. So that's what you want us to do now. So more specific questions of individual reports. Did you look at this? Have you thought of this outside the box idea? Now's the time to give those to you. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll cover upcoming meetings. Dr. Krizik has an announcement first.
In keeping with our good news that we have had at some prior meetings, 8 of our schools will be recognized with academic excellence awards from the Illinois State Board of Education. Those schools are going to be Bryan and Sandburg, Edison, Field, Hawthorne, Jackson, Jefferson, and Lincoln. What's significant about this recognition is that there are only 834 schools in the entire state of Illinois getting a level of recognition. But in the level of recognition that our 8 schools are being recognized, the Academic Excellence Awards, there are only 459 schools in the entire state that have sustained high performance over the last 3 years. So I think there is a lot to celebrate there, and we're certainly proud of the sustained effort of our schools to maintain such high student performance. But I just wanted to share that good news, and it's just something to be proud of. So I needed to put that out there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Krizik. We have one more agenda item. It's a board item only. Superintendent's going to leave, and I'm sure if any cabinet members want to stay for this, that's, I'm giving you a hall pass. Mr. Fox, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and thank you. I'm going to make a couple people stay, but so we'll just take a 1 or 2 minute break, and then we'll return, and Mr. Rossi will be joining us. Okay, we're going to go ahead. We are joined by Mr. Harry Rossi from School Exec Connect. So we had the opportunity to collect data from our community through 3 focus groups that were held and through an online survey where I believe we got over 500 responses. And the outcome of that is the superintendent profile, which Mr. Rossi is going to walk through with us, and then we'll just spend a couple minutes talking about the interview committee process. So I will, I guess, turn the discussion over to you if you want to just talk a little bit about how the profile is put together.
Sure. First of all, good evening, everyone. Thanks for staying so late. We really do think it was a very comprehensive process. Actually, there were 5 focus groups, in addition to 512 responses online. And in those 512 responses, there were, besides answering the questions on the survey, there were a significant number of comments that we forwarded to you. I'm not going to go into detail on everything. I'll start by saying you have a very interested and involved community, including filling the room on a snowy, cold Saturday morning when I thought maybe a few people will come to this, and I think there were about 50 people altogether who came out that morning and had, very, very good, thoughtful comments. We actually spent about 2 hours and 15 minutes altogether. The first hour and 15 minutes were just spent with people who were here asking questions. They were really interested in the process, what the board's role was going to be beyond the focus groups and the online responses, what other role there might be for people. So we spent actually more time talking about that than we actually did with the focus group. But I think I can say there was really consistency between and among all of the groups. Now, having said that, typically when we do the groups, we will have specifically a group of administrators, specifically a group of parents, teachers, and so on. And this is not a criticism. The board opened all of those meetings up to anyone who wanted to attend. So we had a really good mix at every single group of people and comments. So I think it was a good process, a lot of participation. 512 people online is a pretty high number these days, and you have the results. I'll maybe just talk about the combined responses because that combines both the focus group information plus the online information that we had, and we tried to pick out the most common that were here. As far as strengths of the school district, clearly it's a very, very actively involved community. It supported the district very well through finances, including passing referenda. The parents are very involved with the school and their children. There's certainly a perception that the district, even given the process that you're going through, has a strong financial base. I think that's a function of, what's perceived to be good stewardship on behalf of the board and the administrators here. Certainly a very strong feeling that you have great children in this district, and that Elmhurst in and of itself is a wonderful place for people to live and to work. I'll just go over, and probably finally, and maybe even most importantly, people perceive the schools as being safe and secure environments for their students where they can learn, and that you have dedicated staff. In terms of some of the challenges, there seems to be a very broad perception that there's a lack of communication from the board, administrators, down to staff members and parents. That came across quite a bit. Seemed to be a common perception that maybe the culture in the district needed to be improved. We heard in every single group that there were morale issues that needed to be addressed fairly early on in the new administration, and that priorities need to be established both in terms of the educational program as well as financial resources, and obviously you're doing a lot of that already. One of the other things that I think was interesting that came out of this in a number of the groups was the perception of the allocation of resources not being done on an equal basis in different parts of the town where schools, that maybe some of the schools that are in the least advantaged parts of town, and again, everything is relative, we're not getting the resources that some of the other schools did. So those were some of the challenges that we're seeing for the school district. In terms of the profile for a new superintendent, clearly everyone is looking for someone who is going to be a collaborative decision maker, someone who's going to involve all of the stakeholders in decisions that are made, someone who is going to be very, very high in terms of building relationships between and among all of the stakeholders in the district. That's common perception among all of the districts where we do searches, so it's not unique to this district. Communication, people seem to be looking for someone who is really able to communicate the mission of the district, the values of the district, as well as technical aspects of the program, while also having a strong understanding of the finances for the district. Someone who is very knowledgeable with best practices in curriculum, as well as someone who is going to be able to work very closely with the board to establish a positive environment in the district for the future. Those were probably, what I would consider to be the important parts from all of the constituents that we surveyed. And you can go through and look at the percentages of people who responded, in terms of what they saw the greatest strengths in the district challenges and so on. But I think if you look at this report, you'll see common threads that run through all of the groups, as well as through the online survey, and general feeling that it's this point in time we need to bring someone in who's going to be a very, very strong visionary leader, but not someone who is going to be a strong leader in terms of top-down management or micro management. I'd say that's what really we kept hearing most passionately from the people in all of the groups with whom we met. So I don't know how much more you want me to go into today.
I guess I would ask the board members if there's any particular questions you have. And there are three potential ways that we could use this information. One is within this document, it defines the most important skills and traits for the new superintendent, and we could take them as they are or modify those and use those as specific attributes that we're using in our search process. There also is the recommendation that we would share this with any candidates that we have. So as a board, we would want to make sure that we're in a consensus on that, just so they have a sense of who this district are and what, at least for the participants that for these surveys and focus groups, what their input is to the district. And then the third is just general awareness for the board to have an understanding of what an external perception is of where we're at, where our strengths are, our weaknesses are, and what the participants believe are the attributes for our next leader. So I guess my first thing I'd like to focus on is within this document we have, based upon the input that was received, the most important skills and traits for a new superintendent. And if there's not any specific questions for Mr. Rossi, if we could just focus on that piece of it and then come to agreement on how we would use this document. Mrs. Davey.
The only thing I didn't hear was that we're looking for a new leader that's collaborative, that has good communication skills, that is strong in curriculum. I heard those. I didn't hear anything about financial strength in school finance, and I think we would be remiss if we, is that in the, because you didn't bullet it, and I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Here's what I worry about. The pendulum swings back and forth, and we have to be careful that we don't swing too far in one direction and leave out some of those important I'll call them nuts and bolts attributes, and that's school finance, because I think we're witnessing tonight how important it is to have an administration that really has a grasp of the importance of school finance and keeping a school district on the right course. So I don't want to lose that. I want to make sure it's strong, I guess, rather. I don't want to lose it.
Yeah, I mentioned it in passing, but specifically number 9 under the profile of the desired new superintendent, which was the combined responses from survey and focus groups. It mentioned someone who is fiscally responsible with strong understanding of budgets and resource allocation. So, that.
But I'm concerned that it's number 9. And I don't know if those are in any kind of priority order.
They are not.
Okay, because I guess what I'm suggesting is if we're framing something that we're passing out to candidates or are making a statement of what's important to us, I don't want that to be at the bottom of the list.
Thank you. And it is in the profile, but it's not in the attributes. So I think that's important enough to add specifically to the attributes. Mrs. Hirsch?
In terms of the profile of the desired new superintendent, it appears to me, we have great strengths in our school district. I think one of the most important things we can do is when we do get this great feedback from the community, we assure ourselves that all of the challenges that have been identified and agreed upon as brought forward as the 7 most important challenges for the district would be addressed by the profile, the skills and the talent of the new superintendent. I'm sure, my question, Mr. Rossi, is I'm sure we would like someone who would walk on water, be able to balance budgets, do everything properly and correctly, and know everybody in town, know every kid by name. But do you think that of the things that we're looking for, we have a good, solid, thorough, do you feel as though you have a good understanding of what it is that the collective community is looking for, including the board's feedback?
Yeah, if you look at the combined responses, and again, the most important skills and traits for the new superintendent, that page is the survey, specifically the survey results, and then after that, we present separately the focus group results. If you look at the combined survey and focus group results, which, that profile is really the combined attributes, I think you have a really good cross-section there of all kinds of attributes and skills that your community is looking for. And I don't think anything very important is left out of that profile.
I just wanted to add one more comment. I do think that this information is incredibly valuable. It was incredibly valuable to me to read through the summary that you had provided, but also the board was provided with the detail, the very detailed, the summation and understanding by parent group or by community member or by other, what the perceptions were of the district, of the board governance, of overall all of our accomplishments. It was very, very insightful, and I was very appreciative. There were positive and negative. It was all over the board in terms of what it is that we need to do to move the district forward. And it was, 500 individual responses that we all, I printed off, read through them all. It was very thought-provoking. So I want to thank people who might be watching this on TV this late at night. Not many people here, but it was very, very instructive and very, very helpful in moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
There's one thing, Dr. Rossi, maybe you can tell me if it's in your priority list. I was having a conversation on a different topic with a superintendent from a school district in Illinois that's one of the very top school districts in Illinois, and we got on the discussion of what our community was looking for, and I think I highlighted absolutely everything you said. And the wise advice that I was given by this individual was, Jim, there are a lot of people that can do the things that you've just listed. There are very few people that can do those things and have the conversation necessary to take your district to the level of educational excellence that you desire. How do we convey that final attribute?
Well, I think what you're talking about is the whole idea, and it's, obviously overused, but the idea of going from good to great. That's really what you're talking about. Where you are on that continuum, you know better than I, especially given all of the data that you have. But I think you have had enough in the way of responses from your community in terms of what they see as your strengths, what they see as your challenges, and what they see in terms of the kind of individual that they would like to have, for you to now take that information, distill it into appropriate questions that are going to elicit from the candidates the kind of responses that are going to let you know whether or not this person has what it takes to get you to the next level. This district, even given what I heard tonight with the process you're using, the resources here in every single way are so rich that there isn't any reason for you not to challenge the candidates to give you specifics about how you can move to the next level in this district. You have so many good things and such, an involved parent group, teachers group, everyone with whom we met was very, very concerned and really focused on the welfare of children in this district and student achievement, and trying to find ways, given their own backgrounds, their own experiences, and where they were coming from, to let the board know through me and through Linda what it is they see that you need in that next leader who is going to be able to get you to that next level. But ultimately, it's going to be the board's responsibility to take all of this and, seriously challenge the candidates to tell you how they're going to get you to that next level.
Ms. Hirsch.
I'm sorry, I just realized there was one other thing that wasn't explicitly stated in terms of attributes, and I don't know how you feel about this, but one of the things that is most important to me is that we are a relatively complex unit district that's got a very sophisticated parent base, sophisticated teaching staff. We've got sophisticated community that really values education. And so in terms of whether it's a skill or a trait, but more for me personally in terms of their experience that they can bring to the district, we do have some challenges and transitions from 5 to 6, from 8 to 9 that we've been faced with recently. And so I really am, one of the attributes that I'm personally am looking for is someone who does have unit experience and understands some of the intricacies of, of the broad education that we're trying to offer.
Yeah, it's very understandable. It should be one attribute that you consider along with others because, obviously, there aren't, especially in the state of Illinois, there aren't very many unit districts north of I-80. So you would be seriously limiting in terms of the Illinois pool to superintendents who only had unit experience. But there are a number of candidates who have some unit district experience in their background, may not have been as a superintendent. There are some of those as well. But I'm just saying you have to be really careful in terms of how much you limit the pool.
Okay, are there any other questions on the profile? So I think that the listing in here for a general description seems pretty comprehensive. You know, obviously, we'll bring in our personal questions and interest into the interview process. Can we have a consensus that we would see this as a document we could share with the candidates, just to give them that perspective too? Okay. Terrific. This will be available on the district website for anybody that wants to review the profile. It should be up tomorrow if it's not up this evening. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the formation of the committees that will participate in the interviews. And you had given us some additional recommendations on how those typically would be structured. Mrs. Conroy helped work with me as far as putting together a recommendation on how we would put together the committee. So essentially, we'd have two committees. One would be administrator, one would be parent, staff, and community, and they're very small groups. And maybe you could just give us some background on best practice with your experiences for the committee formation.
Well, in terms of numbers, I don't know how many you have in each of the groups. We typically say to try to keep it under 10 if you possibly can.
But if I said we had 50 in each?
You have 50?
I'm kidding. We're in the 10 to 12 range, so based on your recommendation.
So that's fine then. You do want to try to provide representation, but you have to be careful that the numbers are manageable. In terms of best practice, first of all, one of the things that we would want to do is provide a packet of information and make sure that anyone who is involved in that, first of all, signs a confidentiality agreement, because this is a process where people will be applying for this job, some of whom have very good jobs already, and this is considered to be a confidential search. So we will ask anyone who is involved to sign a confidentiality agreement. We would recommend that there should be someone who leads each of those groups. Usually it's the board that decides whether you want to have the groups choose a leader or whether or not there is someone who might be a natural leader in each of those groups, just to make sure that everyone understands what the process is going to be. The one thing we don't want to do is we will not, depending upon how many people are interviewed, if it's 2 or 3, we do not want the groups to rank the candidates. We want them to give you feedback. We will provide a feedback sheet for them. We will ask them to give feedback in a certain manner that comes to the board so that you can see what the individuals who are part of those committees have to say, and then that will come to you. Either Linda or I will meet with whoever is the chair of the committee just to go over the process with that person and make sure that they understand exactly what it is that they're supposed to do in terms of giving the board their feedback.
Okay. The way we are recommending we'll approach it is we have an interim assistant superintendent of human resources, so because he's not a permanent employee, he wouldn't be participating, and he would also give consistency in the 2 committees.
That'd be great.
So we would use Mr. John Carlson, and I've worked with Dr. Krizik to make sure that he's an available resource as a facilitator. And then the next thing we did was we looked at, for the administrative committee, we looked to the cabinet members. So we would have the cabinet members who are able to participate, and then we handed the rest of the administrators over to the cabinet to make a recommendation. So we asked them to cover all 3 of our school levels, 2 2 administrators from elementary, 2 from middle, and 2 from high school. And so the cabinet came back with recommendations on that. And then for the second committee, so we would have 10 individuals in the administrator committee. And then the second committee with parent community members and staff, we try to balance that with community leaders that are non-parents. We brought in 2, and I'll let Mrs. Conroy talk a little bit about how we are recommending those. And then from all of our union representatives, we asked the union leadership to present the individuals. So we'll have 4 members from the teaching staff, and 1 member from maintenance, and 1 from the paraprofessionals. And again, those recommendations come back from us, from their union leadership. And then the other component is for parents, and the PTA Council is going to give us back. We haven't received their parent recommendations, but they're going to make recommendations on parents that would be involved. And Mrs. Conroy helped facilitate formation of the recommended committee. So I'm just going to ask her just to give some background on the community leaders that we're proposing for the process.
I worked with Malia Smith on trying to come up with 2 community leaders that we thought would kind of give us a diverse, 2 different perspectives. And so we went with, we asked Desiree Chen, who is the PR director at Elmhurst College. She has a woman's perspective as well as being an expert in public relations. She also has children in the district, which I think is a great plus as well. So we have Desiree, and then the other, we asked Rich Grodsky. Rich is the director of our park district, and he has a different perspective. Rich is actually going to be retiring next year, and he's been a community leader here in Elmhurst and very well respected. So we kind of feel like we are covering a lot of bases with the 2 leaders that we chose, and we're really excited that they're going to be part of the team.
So I guess the question is, I wanted to talk through just the approach we used. We started with the recommendations from School Exec Connect, and we made a couple modifications because initially there weren't any non-parent members that were part of the committee. We wanted to make sure that we had that other perspective. And then other than that, we used the representation in the district to bring forth the committee to us, as opposed to us trying to pick names. Assuming that we're all okay with this go-forward approach, we need to send out the letters of instruction and make sure that committee members understand what their specific roles are. It is, as Mr. Rossi talked about, and we've talked about throughout the process, a confidential search. So those participating have to come into the room and give their feedback and seal their lips forever. So, I mean, what it really is protecting the interest of those participants who might have excellent jobs, and we're trying to make sure we have the richest pool of candidates, but, should their interest in another position get out, they could put their jobs in jeopardy, and that's really the primary driver behind that. So if there's any questions or concerns or other recommendations, otherwise we'll go forward with this approach.
And I'll get in touch with, is it Dr. Carlson? John Carlson?
I'm embarrassed to say I'm not sure if it's doctor, but it's Mr. John Carlson. And I can give him your contact information or whatever's the best way. But this way we have just one person that we're kind of walking through that.
And what I'll do is I'll sit down and go over early next week, if possible, the process and the documents so that, we clearly know where we're going.
Okay. Mr. Collins?
I have one concern about all this. You have 8 people running for the school board, 7 of which are not currently on the school board, and of the 8, 4 of which will be working with the new superintendent. I would hate to have potentially for 3, 4 members of the new school board not embrace the new superintendent. Let's put it that way. Have we done anything, have we thought through anything to address that?
What we did do was we offered them the opportunity to come, and they each got a personal invitation to participate in the focus group. So this output that we see here in the profile does include their any ideas or thoughts that they have for those that chose to do it. And we didn't audit which ones chose to come to the focus group or not. They had that individual choice. The problem is we have no idea, and at this point, they're not school board members. We have no idea who they'll be. So to select some or any of them without having unless we want to go back to the conversation we had months ago and postpone this decision-making process till after the election, I didn't really see any way to move forward on that. Mrs. Davy.
This probably goes without saying. We have, I think Dr. Rossi is kind of reminded us, we have a great school district. I think we have a great pool of candidates. But we're going to have to sell us to these candidates. I think we need to be careful of having any kind of arrogance as we conduct the first round of interviews and then roll into the three finalists, because my guess is the three finalists, if we get there, are all probably very successful people in very good jobs, or have the potential of being, and we need to think about us putting our best foot forward, and we just need to think about that. And I think that conversation started coming up when we talked about where we were holding our interviews. We need to make sure that we are showing that we are a district that does have high standards, that it's appealing, it's attractive, it's somewhere that someone would want to leave another good place doing good work somewhere else, perhaps, would want to come to. So, as I said, this probably goes without saying, but I just think it's important for all of us to remember that we're gonna be selling ourselves. Because the person we probably want, we may really have to, put a push on to get them to come.
Thank you, and I agree. Obviously, we want our choice of the best, but in order to attract the best, we need to make an desirable environment where they would want to work. If there's no other board discussion, I will thank Mr. Rossi both for the information he shared and for the patience, the lateness of the hour. I'm going to wish you a safe drive home. We just have a couple of housekeeping things. We have 3 upcoming meetings scheduled. Tuesday, February 22nd is a Board of Education business meeting. February 28th, Monday, is the special board meeting that we've added to give us one additional opportunity to talk about the budget reductions that will be upcoming. And then Tuesday, March 8th, is our Board of Education workshop meeting. Are there any board communications? Mrs. Davy.
Quickly, I will just say that the land initiative about a potential lawsuit about the ELL issue is moving forward, and we have another meeting Monday morning, the 14th, Valentine's Day. So I will be attending that meeting. I'm not sure what staff might be going, but we're continuing to monitor that. So if anything comes out of it, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Any other board communication committee reports? Okay, seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mrs. Conroy, seconded by Mrs. Hirsch. All in favor? Those opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, especially to those that stayed to the very bitter end.